welcome to Tales in the Dark. I know many of you enjoy relaxing with these videos, so I recommend turning down the volume until my voice is barely audible. It'll make the experience even more soothing. Before you close your eyes, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you and enjoy listening. Story 1, I kept smoothing it down, pressing the curling edges back into place, but every morning more strips had come loose. Behind the layers, I started seeing something dark, thick lines that looked more like veins than old glue. The scent of mold grew stronger with each tear. This morning, a small patch was damp and warm. At first, I believed it was just the humidity in my apartment. The building was old, and problems with moisture weren't uncommon during certain seasons. The landlord had mentioned issues with the ventilation when I signed the lease, but I had been too charmed by the antique moldings and hardwood floors to care. I pressed my fingers against the loose section, feeling the wallpaper resist my touch with subtle elasticity. The pattern faded florals and muted greens and browns seemed to shift under my fingertips as if the petals were contracting. I blinked hard, attributing the illusion to my morning grogginess. Just need to get some adhesive, I muttered, making a mental note to stop at the hardware store after work. I snapped a quick photo of the damage with my phone, intending to show the clerk what I needed. When I checked the image later that day, my breath caught. The dark lines behind the paper looked different in the photograph, more organized, more deliberate. What had seemed like random stains now resembled something written, characters in an alphabet I couldn't recognize. I zoomed in, feeling a chill spread across my shoulders despite the warmth of my office. That night I stood before the wall, fresh adhesive in hand. As I worked the applicator beneath the curling edges, I could have sworn I felt something flinch beneath the paper. My fingers paused, hovering over the surface. The room fell silent, save for the soft hum of my refrigerator in the adjacent kitchen. I pressed my ear against the wall, feeling foolish yet compelled. Nothing. I continued working, smoothing the adhesive and pressing the wallpaper flat. But when my fingers brushed over a particular section, I heard it a soft, wet sound like lips parting. I jerked back, heart hammering against my ribs. Sleep came fitfully that night. Dreams of something pressing against the thin barrier of the wall invaded my rest, leaving me exhausted by morning. When I dragged myself from bed and entered the living room, I found not just one strip, but an entire section of wallpaper hanging loose, exposing what lay beneath. The dark lines had spread, forming an intricate pattern that pulsed slightly in the morning light. I approached cautiously, phone in hand, to document what I was seeing. The camera refused to focus properly, the image blurring no matter how steady I held my hand. When I reached out to touch the exposed section, the surface was warm and yielded slightly under my finger, like pressing against skin. I recoiled, dropping my phone with a clatter. This wasn't mold. This wasn't moisture damage. This was something else entirely. I called my landlord, trying to keep my voice steady as I described the issue. It's probably just water damage, he said dismissively. These old buildings shift and settle. I'll send someone over next week. Next week wouldn't do. I needed answers now. I began researching the history of the building, diving into local archives and property records. The structure had been built in the early 19th century, originally serving as a private residence before being converted into apartments. Nothing unusual stood out in its history, no tragic deaths, no mysterious disappearances. Yet as night fell and I continued my research, I became aware of a persistent noise coming from the wall, a subtle scratching sound, like fingernails gently dragging across the other side. I tried to ignore it, turning up my music to drown it out. but the scratching only grew more insistent, matching the rhythm of my increasingly rapid heartbeat. I approached the wall again, adhesive abandoned in favor of a different approach. This time I carefully peeled back a section of the wallpaper myself, curiosity overcoming fear. The dark lines beneath shifted as the paper came away, rearranging themselves before my eyes. What had looked like veins now reminded me of circuit boards, or perhaps a sophisticated road map. The exposed section emitted a faint warmth and a sweet, metallic smell that made my head swim. I took a deep breath to steady myself and continued peeling, revealing more of whatever lay beneath. As I worked, the room seemed to grow darker around me, the air becoming thick and difficult to breathe. When I had exposed about a square foot of the wall, I stepped back to observe what I had uncovered. The pattern was beautiful in its complexity, lines intersecting and branching like a living system. And it was changing, subtly but unmistakably, the lines shifting position as if breathing. That night I slept on my couch, unwilling to turn my back on the exposed section of wall. My dreams were invaded by whispers in an unknown language, voices that seemed to emanate from within my own head rather than from any external source. I awoke to find a small, dark stain on my palm, the same color as the lines behind the wallpaper. I scrubbed at it in the bathroom sink, but the mark remained, seeming to sit beneath my skin rather than on its surface. When I pressed it, a jolt of something like electricity shot up my arm, leaving my fingers tingling. The wallpaper had peeled further overnight, exposing more of the pattern. It now covered nearly half of my living room wall, the edges of the paper curling away as if being slowly rejected by the surface beneath. The exposed section pulsed gently, the rhythm matching the subtle throb of the mark on my palm. I began documenting everything, taking notes despite the camera's refusal to capture clear images. I recorded audio of the scratching sounds, which had now evolved into something more complex, a series of clicks and sighs that almost formed words. I pressed my unmarked hand against the exposed section and felt movement beneath, subtle shifts and contractions that reminded me of muscle beneath skin. My research expanded, moving from property records to more esoteric subjects, living architecture, biomorphic structures, sympathetic resonance between organic systems. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that what lived behind my wall was not supernatural, but something far more complex, something that existed in the liminal space between the organic and inorganic worlds. The mark on my palm spread slowly, the dark lines extending up my wrist and along my forearm in a pattern that mirrored what was emerging from behind the wallpaper. I found myself pressing my marked skin against the exposed section of wall, feeling a connection that was both terrifying and oddly comforting. I stopped answering my phone, stopped going to work. My attention became entirely focused on the wall and its gradual emergence. Food lost its appeal. Sleep became an inconvenience that took me away from my observation. The scratching sounds evolved into a humming that resonated in my bones, a frequency that made my teeth ache but which I couldn't bear to be without. When the maintenance worker my landlord sent finally arrived, he found me seated cross-legged before the wall, which was now almost entirely exposed. The pattern had spread across the ceiling and begun to creep down the adjacent walls, turning my apartment into what felt like the interior of some vast, living organism. "Sir, I'm here about the wallpaper." His voice seemed to come from a great distance, difficult to hear over the humming that filled my awareness. I turned slowly, aware of how I must appear unwashed, unshaven, my arms now covered to the shoulders in the dark, vein-like pattern. "It's not the wallpaper that's the problem," I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. "It's what's been hiding behind it all this time." He backed away, mumbling something about needing additional tools from his truck. He never returned. The pattern continued its steady expansion, and I continued my documentation. My notes became less coherent, shifting between detailed observations and passages in a script I didn't recognize, but somehow understood the same symbols I had first seen behind the peeling paper. The mark on my skin advanced further, spreading across my chest and back, down my legs, up my neck. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the figure staring back, a human form gradually being overtaken by something else, something ancient that had waited patiently behind layers of wallpaper and plaster and wood. I understand now that the wall was never meant to be a barrier, but a membrane, a permeable boundary between two worlds that were always meant to merge. What I initially feared, I now welcome. What I tried to fix, I now help to flourish. The wallpaper continues to peel itself off, and I continue to peel away with it, layer by layer, revealing what has always existed beneath the surface of everything. And somewhere in another apartment, someone is noticing a strange new pattern emerging on their wall, dark lines that look more like veins than old paint, a corner of wallpaper that refuses to stay fixed, no matter how firmly they press it down. Story 2, they started at the front door, bare feet, large, wide-set toes. But instead of stopping or turning, they climbed the wall, leaving smears on the paint, and continued onto the ceiling. The trail stopped directly above my bed. The air smelled like wet bark and copper. I haven't looked up since. I first noticed them when I returned home after walking my dog in the evening rain. Something felt different the moment I stepped inside, a peculiar weight in the atmosphere, as if the air had become dense and resistant. My dog refused to cross the threshold, whining with his tail tucked between his legs. I had to carry him inside, which I'd never needed to do before. That's when I saw them, dark, muddy footprints starting just inside my front door. My immediate thought was that someone had broken in, but nothing seemed disturbed or missing. I followed the trail across my hardwood floor, expecting them to lead to the kitchen or perhaps my study. Instead, they made a straight path toward my bedroom. The mud was still wet. I touched it with my fingertip, and it left a rusty smear on my skin that didn't look quite like ordinary mud. It had an odd consistency, slightly viscous, and that distinctive smell of wet bark mixed with something metallic. The strangest part wasn't the intrusion itself, but what happened next. The footprints didn't stop at my bedroom door or even at my bed. They continued up the wall adjacent to my bed, defying gravity, as if whoever or whatever had made them had simply walked up the vertical surface without difficulty. Then they continued across the ceiling, stopping directly above where my head rests when I sleep. I stood frozen, staring at the impossible path. My dog whimpered from the hallway, refusing to enter the bedroom. A chill spread across my skin despite the warmth of the house. Something was profoundly wrong with what I was seeing, beyond the obvious impossibility of it. I checked every window and door, all locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. No other footprints anywhere in the house or in the soft earth outside. Just this single trail, starting at my front door as if someone had materialized there, and ending above my bed as if they had stopped to wait. For what? That night I slept on the couch, or rather I lay awake on the couch, listening. My house has always made noises, the settling of an older structure, the expansion and contraction of wood and metal with temperature changes, but that night, every creak and groan sounded deliberate. My dog stayed pressed against me, alert and trembling. When morning came, I expected the footprints to have dried or perhaps even to have disappeared altogether, proving they had been a hallucination brought on by stress or exhaustion. But they remained, still damp, still smelling of wet bark and copper. I tried to clean them first with a wet cloth, then with increasingly harsh chemicals. The mud would not come off. Instead, it seemed to smear deeper into the paint, staining it permanently. I called a friend who works in home restoration. When he arrived, his reaction validated my fear. He saw the footprints too, followed them with his eyes up the wall and across the ceiling. "What the hell happened here?" he asked. I had no answer. He tried industrial strength cleaners. When those failed, he suggested repainting. The first coat of paint soaked through immediately, the dark stain of the footprints bleeding through as if the paint weren't there at all. The second coat did the same, so did the third. "I've never seen anything like this," he admitted, backing away from the wall. "It's like the stain is coming from inside the surface, not on top of it." That night I stayed at a hotel. When I returned the next day, the footprints had changed. They were no longer simply mud stains on my floors, walls, and ceiling. They had depth, now actual indentations, as if the weight of whatever had made them was gradually pressing deeper into the surfaces of my home. I began researching folklore, paranormal phenomena, even structural engineering to see if there could be a rational explanation for footprints appearing to climb walls. I found nothing conclusive, just fragments that almost fit but never quite explained what was happening in my home. I set up cameras. The footage showed nothing unusual until the third night. At exactly midnight, the camera pointed at the ceiling footprints glitched. When the feed returned, the indentations appeared deeper. I watched the recordings repeatedly. There was no visible movement, no figure, just the deepening of the prints as if they were being pressed in by an invisible force. My sleep became fragmented. When I did sleep, I dreamed of mud thick, consuming mud that filled my lungs and pulled me down into darkness. I would wake gasping, feeling pressure on my chest. My dog began to refuse food and water, his eyes constantly fixed on the ceiling above my bed. I brought in a medium, a priest, a structural engineer. The medium left without completing her assessment, visibly shaken. The priest blessed the house but suggested I consider moving. The engineer found no explanation for the increasing depth of the footprints but noted that if they continued to deepen, they might eventually compromise the structural integrity of the ceiling. One morning I noticed something new. A fine, dusty material had fallen onto my bed. It was drywall and plaster from the ceiling, where the deepest footprint had nearly broken through. Whatever was on the other side was getting closer. I packed a bag that day. As I was leaving, I noticed that the footprints on the floor had also changed. They no longer led only from the front door to the bedroom. New prints had appeared, leading from my bed back toward the front door. They were fresher, wetter, and they were following me. I ran, slammed the door behind me, drove until my gas light came on. I checked into another hotel, took a scalding shower, and tried to convince myself I was safe. But when I stepped out of the bathroom, I saw a single, muddy footprint just inside the hotel room door. That night I sat in a chair facing the door, a kitchen knife in my hand. I must have fallen asleep despite my terror because I woke to a sound, a wet, squelching noise like feet moving through thick mud. The sound was coming from above me. Slowly I raised my eyes to the hotel room's ceiling. The footprints had followed me. They started at the door and led across the ceiling, directly above where I had been sitting. But now there was something different. The last footprint wasn't just an indentation. It was breaking through, the ceiling bulging downward, plaster cracking, something pushing from the other side. I've changed hotels twice since then. I've driven for days, but it always finds me. The mud prints always appear, and they always lead to the ceiling above wherever I rest. I write this now from a bustling public place, surrounded by people, the constant noise and movement my only comfort. But I know it won't last. Already I can smell it, wet bark and copper growing stronger by the minute. The strangest part is I still don't know what wants me, what followed me home that rainy evening and never left, what walks on ceilings and smells of earth and blood, what waits patiently above my head night after night. I only know one thing with certainty: eventually I'll have to look up. Story 3. I live in a cabin, no wiring for anything fancy, but last night something rang, clear, melodic, 3 tones like an old-fashioned chime. I opened the door to silence and thick fog. The sound echoed faintly in the woods behind my house. The air had a sweetness to it, like honeysuckle and decay. I stood in the doorway, scanning the darkness. My breath formed small clouds that dissipated into the night. Nothing moved. No footprints disturbed the thin layer of frost on my porch steps. I closed the door, sliding the bolt lock into place with a satisfying click. The cabin felt different when I turned around, colder somehow, though the fire still crackled in the stone hearth. I shook my head and chalked it up to the night air following me inside. Yet something lingered, a presence that hadn't been there before, as if the door had let in more than just the cold. I resumed my evening routine, a cup of tea, a worn paperback novel, the occasional stoking of the fire, but concentration eluded me. My eyes kept drifting to the windows, searching the darkness beyond the glass. The words on the page blurred together, meaningless shapes that refused to form coherent thoughts. Then it happened again, 3 distinct chimes, musical and clear. I dropped my book and spun toward the door. The sound wasn't coming from outside, it resonated from within the cabin itself. My heart hammered against my ribs as I searched each room, finding nothing unusual, no source for the phantom doorbell. Sleep came fitfully that night, dreams of distant chimes and corridors that stretched beyond physical possibility plagued me. I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows, momentarily banishing the unease of the previous night. I brewed coffee and sat at my small wooden table, notebook open before me. I began to document what had happened, describing the sound in detail, noting the time it occurred approximately and the sensations that accompanied it. The act of writing made it real, gave shape to something that felt increasingly nebulous in the light of day. My pen hesitated over the paper. What else could I record? The smell, yes, that strange sweetness that had hung in the air. As I wrote the words, I caught a whiff of it again, honeysuckle undercut with something less pleasant. I looked up sharply, but nothing in my cabin could produce such a scent. I decided to search the perimeter of my property. The forest pressed close to my cabin on 3 sides, ancient trees standing sentinel like disapproving observers. The ground was soft after recent rain, yet I found no evidence of visitors. No tire tracks on the narrow dirt road, no footprints save my own. Back inside, I inspected the cabin itself. Built decades ago, it had never had modern amenities installed. No doorbell system, no intercom, nothing that could produce the sound I'd heard. I checked my phone and other electronics, but none were capable of making that particular chime. I began to take photographs, documenting everything in my space: the walls, the corners where shadows gathered, the door itself. Looking through them later, I noticed something odd in one image, a faint distortion in the corner of my living room, like heat rising from pavement. When I looked at the actual corner, nothing seemed amiss, yet through the camera lens, the space appeared to warp slightly. I started recording sounds throughout the day, leaving my phone in different rooms while I went about my business. Most recordings captured nothing unusual, just the natural creaks and groans of an old wooden structure, the soft patter of rain on the roof, the whisper of wind through the trees outside. Until one didn't. In the background of a particularly quiet recording, beneath the ambient noise, I could make out something that sounded like whispering. I enhanced the audio, isolated it, played it back at different speeds. The words remained indecipherable, but their rhythm suggested a pattern, almost like a conversation happening just beyond the threshold of hearing. That night I sat in the dark, waiting. My notebook open, pen poised, camera and phone ready to capture whatever might happen. The silence stretched, broken only by the occasional pop from the dying embers in the fireplace. The chime came at what felt like the deepest part of night, 3 notes, perfect and clear. This time I was ready, or so I thought. I hit record on my phone and moved toward the sound. It seemed to come from the same corner where the photograph had shown that strange distortion. The air felt heavy there, resistant, as if I were pushing through invisible cobwebs. The scent of honeysuckle grew stronger, cloying and sweet. "Who's there?" My voice sounded flat, absorbed by the stillness. No answer came, but the temperature around me plummeted. My breath clouded before my face, and the hairs on my arms stood on end. The corner of the room darkened, not as if a light had been extinguished, but as if the darkness itself had become more substantial. I raised my camera and took several photographs in quick succession. The flash illuminated nothing unusual, but the preview screen showed something different in each image. The darkness in the corner seemed to have structure, form, almost like a doorway standing where no door existed. I reached out, my fingers trembling. The air felt wrong, both solid and insubstantial, cold yet vibrating with energy. When my fingertips touched the darkness, a shock traveled up my arm, sharp and electric. I jerked back, dropping my camera, which clattered to the floor. The photos it had taken began to change, not gradually, but in sudden jumps each time I looked away and back again. The doorway-like shape grew more defined, and in the final image, something stood within it, a silhouette darker than the surrounding darkness, featureless yet unmistakably watching. I backed away, fumbling for the light switch. When the overhead light flooded the room, the corner appeared normal again, just wooden walls meeting at right angles, nothing more. But my camera screen still showed something else entirely. I spent the remainder of the night documenting everything, taking measurements of the corner, recording temperature fluctuations, and writing detailed descriptions of what I'd experienced. The more I observed, the more I noticed subtle changes in my environment. The wood grain on the wall seemed to shift when viewed peripherally. Objects left near that corner would be slightly displaced when I returned. A glass of water placed nearby developed ripples without being touched. Days passed in this manner, with each night bringing the phantom doorbell, and each investigation revealing more inconsistencies in reality. I began mapping these anomalies, creating a diagram of my cabin with markers indicating where reality seemed thinnest. My notes became increasingly detailed, yet paradoxically less coherent. Reading back through them, I found passages I didn't remember writing, observations made during hours I was certain I'd been asleep. In one margin, written in my handwriting but unfamiliar in its phrasing, the door goes both ways. Sleep became a foreign country, one I visited less and less frequently. Dark circles formed under my eyes. My reflection in the mirror began to look wrong, somehow my features slightly asymmetrical, my movements seeming to lag behind my intentions. I became obsessed with the corner, with the doorway that wasn't there except in photographs and recordings. I pushed furniture against it, covered it with blankets, even considered boarding it up with planks of wood. Nothing helped. The chimes continued, now sometimes accompanied by soft knocking, as if something were patiently requesting entry. One night, driven by exhaustion and a growing desperation, I decided to confront whatever lurked beyond that non-existent doorway. I positioned my camera on a tripod, focused on the corner, and set it to record. Then I sat directly before the anomaly, waiting. The chimes came, 3 perfect notes hanging in the air. The darkness deepened, folded in on itself, opened like an iris. The honeysuckle scent intensified, now almost unbearably sweet. And underneath it, the decay I'd noted that first night was stronger too, organic and rich. "What do you want?" I asked the darkness. The air stirred, carrying what might have been words, might have been simply the sound of wind through empty spaces. The temperature dropped sharply. My breath clouded before me, obscuring my view momentarily. When it cleared, someone stood in the corner, or something that wore the approximation of a human form. Its edges blurred, as if it wasn't fully present in my reality. Its face shifted between features, never settling on any particular configuration. Looking at it was like trying to focus on a word written in water. "You rang," it said, though no mouth moved to form the words. The voice resonated within my skull rather than in the air between us. "I didn't," I replied, my own voice faint and trembling. "There's no doorbell here." A sound emerged from the figure, something adjacent to laughter. "Every threshold has its bell," it said. "Every boundary can be crossed if one knows how to request entry." "What are you?" It seemed to consider the question, its form rippling like heat distortion. "A traveler," it said finally. "As you are, as you will be." It extended what might have been a hand, composed of shadow and suggestion rather than flesh. "Would you like to see?" Every instinct screamed danger, yet curiosity pulled at me with equal force. I had spent so long documenting, observing, trying to understand. Here, finally, was the source offering explanation. "See what?" I managed to ask. "The spaces between," it replied. "The passages that connect what you perceive as separate. The doors that always exist, waiting to be acknowledged." I thought of my notes, the strange writing I didn't remember, the words about doors going both ways. Had I already begun to understand more than I consciously knew? Slowly, hesitantly, I reached toward the extended shadow hand. The air between us thickened, became almost liquid. The boundaries of my perception warped, stretched, began to tear. My fingers touched something cold, neither solid nor gaseous, a state of matter I had no reference for. The contact sent shocks of sensation up my arm, not painful but overwhelming, like every nerve firing simultaneously. The figure smiled, or created an approximation of a smile with its shifting features. "You've been watching the threshold for so long," it said. "Now the threshold watches back." Reality folded. The corner of my cabin stretched, expanded, became a corridor extending beyond physical possibility. I saw other places, other rooms, other corners where darkness gathered and formed doorways. Some looked like places I recognized, others were alien landscapes that hurt my eyes to perceive. And in the distance, growing closer, other figures, other travelers, moving toward the opening I had unwittingly created. I tried to pull away, to break contact with the shadow being, but found myself unable to move. My body responded sluggishly, as if I were attempting to control it from a great distance. "What's happening to me?" My voice sounded wrong, distorted, and echoing. "You're becoming a threshold," the figure said, its grip on me tightening. "A door that others can use, a bell that others can ring." I struggled harder, finally wrenching away from its touch. The corridor of impossibility wavered, began to close. The shadow being's expression shifted to something like disappointment. "You cannot close what has been opened," it said. "You cannot unknown what you now know." With tremendous effort, I backed away, stumbling over my own feet. The figure remained in the corner, watching, as the doorway that wasn't there began to shrink. "I'll find another way in," it promised as it receded. Another bell to ring. Then it was gone, the corner just a corner again, two walls meeting at right angles. I collapsed to the floor, shaking uncontrollably, relief flooding through me. Only later, reviewing the camera footage, did I realize the truth. The recording showed nothing, no figure, no doorway, just me sitting alone, talking to an empty corner, reaching out to touch nothing at all. But when I raised my arm to the light, dark marks circled my wrist where the shadow hand had gripped me, fading slowly like a bruise. I still live in the cabin. I've considered leaving, but where would I go? The corner remains just a corner during daylight hours. My notes and photographs provide evidence that something happened, yet doubt creeps in with each passing day. But sometimes when I catch my reflection unexpectedly in a window, a mirror, a pooled surface of water, I see something wrong in my eyes. A darkness that doesn't belong there. A doorway opening where none should exist. And at night I lie awake listening, not for the chime that started everything, but for the sound of myself ringing, calling something home. Story 4, I tripped over it just a slight rise under the corner, pulled the rug back expecting a warped board. Instead I found metal. A square hatch bolted shut with rusted hinges and claw marks along the edges. The room smelled of dust and stagnant water. I haven't opened it yet, but sometimes it vibrates. The carpet had been there since I moved in, a worn Persian with faded crimson patterns that matched nothing else in my decor. I'd meant to replace it for ages. Now I understood why the previous owner left it behind, perfectly centered in the living room despite its frayed edges and outdated design. That night I sat cross-legged beside the exposed hatch, running my fingers over the cool metal. The surface felt wrong, somehow not cold like ordinary steel, but almost body temperature with a subtle pulse beneath my fingertips. The bolt looked simple enough to remove, 4 heavy screws holding it in place. I had the tools. I could have opened it right then, but something held me back. When I pressed my ear against the metal, the silence from within seemed deliberate, as if whatever was below was holding its breath, waiting for me to leave. As ridiculous as it sounds, I found myself whispering to it, asking what it wanted. No response came, but when I pulled away, a faint smell like wet earth and something metallic like old pennies lingered in my nostrils. I covered it again before bed, carefully repositioning the rug exactly as it had been. The slight bulge now obvious to me where I'd never noticed it before. Sleep came fitfully that night, my dreams filled with scraping sounds and the sensation of something pressing upward through my mattress. Morning brought rationality. Homes have access hatches for plumbing, electrical work, storage. Nothing sinister about that. I called the realtor who had sold me the house, casually asking about any basement or crawlspace access points. "The foundation is solid concrete," she said, her voice cheerful. "One of the selling points, actually. No risk of flooding or structural issues. So there wouldn't be any reason for an access hatch in the living room floor." The silence lasted several heartbeats too long. "I'm not aware of any such feature," she finally replied, her tone noticeably cooler. "Is there something specific you're concerned about?" I mumbled something about hearing strange noises and ended the call, more unsettled than before. If the foundation was solid concrete, what purpose could the hatch serve? And those scratch marks, were they made by someone trying to get in or someone trying to get out? I began documenting everything. I took photos of the hatch from every angle, noting the unusual patina of the metal, the deepness of the scratch marks. I recorded ambient sound in the room at different times of day, capturing what might have been just house-settling sounds, but on playback sometimes sounded like distant, muffled speech. The vibrations weren't consistent. Sometimes days would pass with nothing. Then, without warning, often when I was alone reading or working, a low hum would begin beneath the rug, not mechanical like a furnace or water heater, more organic, like a purr or a growl. I started keeping a journal of these occurrences, looking for patterns. Was it happening at regular intervals? Was it triggered by something I did? The only consistency I found was that the vibrations seemed stronger when I acknowledged them, when I placed my hand on the rug or spoke aloud about what I was feeling. My research led me down increasingly bizarre paths. The house wasn't that old, built in the mid-70s according to county records. No reports of missing persons or violent crimes at this address. The land itself had once been farmland before the suburbs sprawled outward and swallowed it whole. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself scrolling through an online forum dedicated to unusual architectural features. I posted about my find, describing the metal hatch without mentioning the vibrations or my growing unease. Responses trickled in, mostly practical suggestions about utility access or old bomb shelters from the Cold War era. Then a private message arrived from a user with no profile picture. "Don't open it. They put those rugs there for a reason." When I replied asking for clarification, the account had already been deleted. The next morning, I woke to find the rug had shifted several inches from where I'd left it, exposing one corner of the hatch. The bolt, which I hadn't touched since discovering it, was now partially unscrewed, one of the 4 screws missing entirely. I searched the floor, crawling on hands and knees, but found no trace of the missing screw. What I did find in the crack between the hatch and the surrounding floorboards was a single human fingernail, yellowed with age but unmistakable. That should have been my breaking point, the moment when any rational person would pack a bag and leave. Instead, I felt a sick fascination taking hold. I needed to know what was below that hatch, even as another part of my mind screamed warnings. I decided to set up a camera on my laptop positioned to capture the rug in the exposed corner of the hatch. I made sure it had enough battery for an overnight recording, then left the house entirely, checking into a nearby motel with nothing but a change of clothes and my toothbrush. Sleep evaded me, my mind racing with possibilities both mundane and monstrous. By dawn, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting to what was probably just an old service entrance, sealed off when the house was renovated decades ago. When I returned home, the rug was gone entirely. The hatch stood fully exposed in the middle of my living room floor, 3 of its 4 bolts removed. The 4th hung loose, as if someone had been interrupted before finishing the job. My laptop was closed, though I'd left it open and recording. When I checked the video file, it showed nothing unusual for the first few hours, just the empty room, the rug, the corner of the hatch. Then, at exactly midnight, the recording became corrupted. The timestamp continued, but the image degraded into pixelated static. The audio, however, remained intact. For several minutes, nothing but the ambient sounds of the house. Then a scraping noise growing louder, the distinct sound of fabric dragging across hardwood, and beneath it all, a wet, labored breathing that made my skin prickle with recognition. It sounded just like me when I'm having a nightmare. Standing over the nearly opened hatch, I felt lightheaded. The room seemed to tilt and sway around me, the walls breathing in and out like living things. The metal of the hatch no longer felt cool but warm, almost hot to the touch, as if whatever was below radiated heat. The final bolt came away in my hand with barely any effort. Nothing now prevented me from lifting the hatch and peering into whatever space existed below my living room floor. Against everything my instincts were screaming, I curled my fingers around the edge of the metal square. It was lighter than expected, rising with minimal resistance. The hinges, despite their rusted appearance, made no sound as the hatch swung upward and back, revealing a perfect square of absolute darkness. No ladder, no steps, just an opening into what should have been solid concrete foundation, but instead yawned like a mouth into nothingness. I leaned forward, straining to see anything in that perfect void. From below came a sound, my name, whispered in a voice I recognized as my own, but wrong somehow, as if heard through water or thick glass. I jerked back, but not quickly enough. Something reached up from that impossible darkness, not a hand exactly, but something with fingers that wrapped around my wrist with gentle, insistent pressure. The skin felt exactly like mine, same temperature, same texture, but I could feel where it ended abruptly at the wrist, the raw edge pressing against my pulse point. The grip wasn't tight, wasn't threatening. It felt more like a greeting or a recognition, like something that had been waiting a very long time. I didn't scream, didn't pull away. Some deeper part of me understood what was happening, had perhaps always known. The fingernails on the thing holding me were bitten to the quick, just like mine. The callus on the thumb positioned exactly where I hold my pen when writing. Slowly, almost tenderly, it pulled my hand into the darkness. The air below felt like bathwater, warm, dense, welcoming. I heard whispering from the depths, a conversation already in progress, spoken in countless voices that all sounded like variations of my own. And I understood two things with absolute clarity. I would go down into that darkness, and something would come up to take my place. The choice had been made long before I found the hatch, perhaps before I even moved into this house. The contract had been written in a language I couldn't read, but somehow always understood. As my body slipped forward into the opening, I felt a curious sense of homecoming. My other self, the one who would live above, grasped my shoulder in passing a gesture that might have been gratitude or comfort. I saw its face as we traded places, my face, but with eyes that had seen the darkness beneath for far too long. Now it would feel sunshine again. Now it would breathe fresh air. Now I would join the others below, adding my whisper to the chorus that calls through the hatch when the vibrations are just right. When the next occupant trips over the rug that will mysteriously reappear, covering what should never have been found. We must be patient, we must be still. But sometimes we vibrate. Story 5. I was taking a photo of the living room when I noticed it, a shape in the frame that wasn't there in real life. Faint and hunched just behind the couch. I spun around, nothing, but the scent of sweat and dirt hung in the air. When I checked my gallery again, the shape was closer in the second shot. At first, I figured it was a trick of the light, perhaps a shadow from the lamp or a smudge on my lens. But as I swiped back and forth between the images, comparing them with meticulous attention, my certainty wavered. The silhouette was more defined in the second photo, vaguely human-shaped, with what appeared to be a slouched posture. My fingers trembled slightly as I held the phone. I took another picture of the same spot, this time watching the screen intently as I pressed the shutter. For a brief moment, as the camera processed the image, I thought I saw a flicker of movement. The resulting photo showed nothing unusual. Relief washed over me, but something nagged at the edges of my mind. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards sent a jolt through my body. The darkness felt heavier somehow, pressing against my skin with an almost tangible weight. When I finally drifted off, my dreams were filled with blurry photographs and faceless figures. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been nothing, just my imagination running wild after watching too many late-night horror videos. I went about my day normally, making coffee, answering emails, calling my sister. But when I opened my photos to send her a picture of my new bookshelf, I froze. All my recent photos were there, arranged neatly in rows, yet something about them seemed wrong. I zoomed in on the living room pictures from yesterday. In the background of each image, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, was the shape. In each successive photo, it had moved closer to the center of the frame. My heartbeat quickened. I took a screenshot, then another photo of my empty hallway. When I reviewed it, the same dark silhouette stood at the far end, indistinct but unmistakable. I took another shot immediately after the figure was now midway down the hall. I deleted the photos, then the entire gallery. I even reset my phone to factory settings, my fingers working frantically across the screen. When it rebooted, I breathed deeply, trying to calm myself. Perhaps I needed a break from screens altogether. That evening, as dusk painted my walls in purple and blue, I noticed a strange buzzing sound coming from my jacket pocket. My phone was vibrating continuously, though no calls or messages were coming through. When I checked the screen, the photo app had opened itself. Inside was a single image, a picture of me, sitting exactly where I was now, taken from a perspective directly behind my head. I flung the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, screen still glowing. The sharp smell of copper filled my nostrils, metallic and invasive. The walls of my apartment seemed to contract slightly, then expand, as if the building itself were breathing. I needed evidence, needed to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. I retrieved my old digital camera from the closet, blowing dust from its lens. I positioned it on the bookshelf, setting it to take photos at regular intervals throughout the night. Then I sat in the center of my living room, lights blazing, waiting. Nothing happened for hours. The camera clicked faithfully, capturing frame after frame of my empty apartment. My eyelids grew heavy, my head nodding forward despite my determination to stay alert. Just as I was about to give up and go to bed, all the lights in my apartment dimmed simultaneously, then brightened again. The air pressure changed, making my ears pop, and the smell, that earthen, sweaty odor, returned stronger than before. I grabbed the camera, fingers fumbling as I reviewed the most recent images. My breath caught in my throat. The first several photos showed only me sitting alone, but in the last few, a dark figure had begun to materialize behind me. In each successive frame, it became more substantial, more real. In the final image, taken moments ago, it stood directly behind my chair, a hand, or what looked like a hand, extending toward my shoulder. I whirled around, camera clutched to my chest. The room was empty, but the air felt thick, resistant, as if I were moving through water. When I turned back, the camera's screen had gone black. My skin prickled with goosebumps. Something cold brushed against the back of my neck, so light it could have been a draft, yet so deliberate it could only be a touch. I bolted from the chair, rushing to the bathroom and locking the door behind me. Under the harsh fluorescent light, I examined my neck in the mirror. A smudge of dirt marked the spot where I'd felt the touch. I tried to wipe it away, but it remained, dark against my skin like a bruise. The mirror began to fog, though the shower wasn't running. Letters appeared in the condensation, written by an unseen finger. I see you when you sleep. I blinked and the message was gone. The mirror was clear. But now my reflection looked wrong, slightly delayed, as if it were watching me rather than mimicking my movements. I spent that night in my car, parked under bright street lights. When morning came, exhaustion and embarrassment set in. I convinced myself it had been a stress-induced episode, perhaps even a minor breakdown. I returned to my apartment determined to put it behind me. Everything seemed normal. I cleaned thoroughly, opening windows to let fresh air circulate. I deleted all the photos from my camera and stored it away. My phone remained off, tucked in a drawer. For several days, life continued without incident, and my fear began to fade. Then my neighbor knocked on my door, concern evident in her expression. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I heard noises from your apartment last night. It sounded like someone was dragging furniture around, but it went on for hours." I hadn't been home last night. I'd fallen asleep on a friend's couch after dinner. My neighbor frowned at my silence. "Also, there's someone in your window sometimes. I thought it was you, but the shape seemed wrong, too tall." Cold dread pooled in my stomach. I thanked her and closed the door, leaning against it as panic rose in my chest. My gaze drifted to my jacket hanging by the door, to the slight bulge in its pocket. My phone was there, though I was certain I'd left it in the drawer. The screen lit up as I pulled it out, displaying a notification from my photo gallery. "New shared album, you." With trembling fingers, I opened it. Hundreds of photos filled the screen, all of me, sleeping, eating, reading, showering, some from angles impossible for anyone to capture without me noticing, some from inside closets, from under furniture, some from inches away from my sleeping face. And in the most recent ones, something was changing. In each photo, my image became slightly blurrier, while the dark figure behind me grew more defined. In the last photo, taken while I slept on my friend's couch, my features had become almost indistinguishable, while the figure, now clearly shaped like a person, but with proportions subtly wrong, appeared solid and real. The phone grew hot in my hand. The screen flickered, cycling rapidly through every photo in the album before settling on a live image of me from behind, holding the phone. I could see myself on the screen, and behind me the figure, its face finally visible. It wore my face, but not as it was now, as it had looked in the original photos before the blurring began. My face, my clothes, my expressions, all perfectly captured and reproduced on this thing that had been stalking me. The realization hit me with sickening clarity. It wasn't just watching me, it was becoming me. I dropped the phone, but it didn't matter anymore. I could feel something now, a pressure against my back, conforming to my shape, melding with me. The smell of dirt and sweat suffocated me, filling my lungs with each panicked breath. My skin buzzed with pins and needles, as if my whole body had fallen asleep and was now reawakening as something else. My neighbor found my phone in the hallway outside my apartment. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. She swiped through my photos, looking for contact information, perhaps, or clues to where I had gone. All she found were countless selfies I didn't remember taking, all with the same strange expression: my mouth stretched too wide, my eyes too dark, my posture subtly wrong. In each photo, almost imperceptible in the background, was a blurry figure that looked vaguely like me, growing fainter with each shot, like a ghost being erased from existence. I'm still here, watching from within as my body moves through the world. My hands type messages I don't compose. My voice speaks words I don't form. My eyes take pictures of others, always watching, always searching for the next one. And sometimes, when I look at the photos later, I can see shapes behind those people. Shapes that aren't visible in real life. Well, yeah. Story 6, 3 of my jackets, 2 hoodies, 1 long heavy coat I didn't recognize, faded black, too long in the sleeves. When I touched it, the fabric felt damp. The pockets were empty, except for a crushed cigarette and a photo of me sleeping on the couch. The scent was unfamiliar: pine sap, metal, and something burnt. I stepped back from the closet, breath caught in my throat. The photograph trembled between my fingers, unmistakably me, hair spilled across the cushion, one arm dangling toward the floor. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Perhaps a prank from a roommate or friend, but I lived alone, and the angle of the photo suggested someone standing directly over me while I slept. The coat didn't belong to any previous visitor. Its texture felt wrong against my skin, almost oily despite being dry to the touch. I hung it back up, trying to dismiss the unease crawling up my spine. The world had tilted slightly, reality askew by just a few degrees, enough to notice, not enough to name. That night, sleep evaded me. Every creak of the old building amplified in my ears. The darkness felt thicker somehow, pressing against my eyes. I thought about the coat hanging among my possessions, claiming space. When dawn finally arrived, I decided to throw it away. But when I opened the closet, the coat hung in a different position than I'd left it. The collar turned up, sleeves straightened. I touched it again, and this time the dampness had concentrated around the cuffs, leaving dark stains that resembled handprints. The odor had intensified, metallic and sharp, with that burnt undertone growing stronger. I pulled it from the hanger and stuffed it into a garbage bag. The fabric seemed to resist, catching on the plastic as if clinging to me. Once sealed, I carried the bag to the dumpster behind my building and buried it beneath other trash. Relief washed over me as I returned home. The morning light streamed through my windows, normalcy restored. I showered, had breakfast, answered emails. The strange coat became just an odd story to tell myself. Until I heard a soft thud from my bedroom. The closet door stood ajar, though I distinctly remembered closing it. And there on the floor, the coat, splayed out like a body, sleeves extended toward me. No bag, no explanation for its return, just damp fabric darkening my carpet. I backed away, heart pounding against my ribs. My phone was in my hand before I consciously reached for it. I took photos, documenting the impossible garment on my floor. The screen showed only a black smudge where the coat should be. I tried again. Same result. When I looked up from the screen, the coat had moved closer to my feet. That was when I noticed the sound, a soft, wet rasping that rose and fell like breathing. Not from the coat, but from inside the closet. I approached slowly, drawn by a compulsion stronger than fear. The rasping grew louder, synchronized with a subtle movement of air against my face. Inside the closet, my clothes had been pushed aside, revealing a rectangular darkness against the back wall. Not a shadow, but an opening, a narrow doorway where solid wall should be. The smell of pine and metal wafted from this impossible space. I reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the edge of the darkness. The surface rippled like water, cold against my skin. My fingertips came away stained with something black and viscous. I began documenting everything, taking notes in a journal, describing each change in the coat and closet. The stains on the coat shifted position overnight. The doorway in the closet varied in width, sometimes just a crack, other nights wide enough to step through. I hung bells on my closet door to alert me to its opening, but they never rang, even when I found the door wide open in the morning. My dreams changed. I walked through unfamiliar forests where the trees leaked black fluid. I followed muddy footprints across wooden floors in houses I'd never visited. I woke with pine needles in my hair and dirt under my fingernails. One morning I found a second photograph in the coat pocket me again, this time at my desk, writing in my journal. The image captured the back of my head, taken from inside my room while I worked. But what disturbed me most was the timestamp embedded in the corner of the photo, tomorrow's date. I began setting up recording devices, a camera facing the closet, another facing my bed, motion sensors near the coat, audio recorders throughout the apartment. I needed evidence, something to validate what was happening. The first night yielded nothing, all footage normal, sensors silent. On the second night, every device failed simultaneously. Power drained from batteries that should have lasted days. Digital recordings corrupted into static and visual noise. The only clear image, a single frame showing a figure in a black coat standing at the foot of my bed, its back to the camera, head tilted at an unnatural angle. My neighbors complained about noises from my apartment during the night, dragging sounds, footsteps, a persistent knocking that started and stopped at irregular intervals. I heard nothing. The coat began to change. The fabric thickened, the color deepened to an absolute black that seemed to absorb light. The dampness remained, but now left no residue on my fingers, as if the moisture existed in some dimension adjacent to our own. Most disturbing of all, the coat felt heavier, denser, as if it contained something other than padding and lining. I noticed other changes in my apartment. Objects moved between rooms. Water ran cold no matter how long I waited. Shadows lingered after their casting light had gone. Food rotted within hours of purchase, and always that burnt smell growing stronger each day. The doorway in my closet widened. The darkness beyond it sometimes flickered with distant movement, like figures passing before a fire. The rasping sound evolved into something almost like word syllables just beyond comprehension, repeated in patterns that almost made sense. I considered leaving, abandoning everything and fleeing to somewhere new, but something told me the coat would follow, that the door in the closet would appear wherever I went. That running would only make things worse. Instead, I decided to confront whatever waited on the other side. I prepared carefully, flashlight, knife, a length of rope tied to my bedpost, the other end around my waist, phone set to record audio. Whatever happened, I wanted some record to remain. The coat waited for me, hanging innocently among my other clothes. I put it on. The weight of it pressed down on my shoulders, the sleeves extending past my fingertips. The smell enveloped me, pine, metal, burning. The fabric no longer felt damp, but alive, pulsing gently against my skin. The doorway gaped wide, darkness swirling beyond like ink in water. The rasping had stopped, replaced by a profound silence that felt expectant, waiting. My flashlight beam disappeared into the black, absorbed completely. I stepped forward, rope trailing behind me. The darkness parted around my body like a curtain, cold and thick. One step, two. The floor beneath my feet changed from carpet to something soft and yielding, like moss or wet earth. The air grew dense, difficult to breathe. My light revealed nothing but swirling black, occasionally broken by shapes that could have been trees or figures or nothing human at all. The coat grew heavier still, pulling me forward when I tried to stop. The rope around my waist went slack. I turned back, the doorway had vanished. My apartment, my world, gone replaced by this lightless place of whispers and movement. Fear surged through me, but beneath it rose a strange recognition, a sense of return, of coming home. Ahead, something moved in the darkness, a figure in a coat identical to mine, back turned, head tilted at that same unnatural angle. It began to turn slowly toward me. I knew I should run, should scream, should fight against whatever was happening. Instead, I stepped forward to meet it, to see its face, to understand at last. The figure turned fully, and I saw myself not as I was, but as I would become. Eyes black and glistening, skin pale as paper, mouth stretched in a smile too wide for a human face. It held out a hand, sleeve dripping black fluid onto the forest floor. And I realized then I wasn't wearing the coat. The coat was wearing me. Behind my reflection, others appeared, countless figures in identical coats, stretching back through the trees, each with my face in various stages of transformation. Some barely changed, others barely recognizable as human, all watching, all waiting. My reflection spoke, voice like dry leaves rustling. We've been waiting for you to join us. I wanted to refuse, to deny whatever fate they offered, but the coat tightened around me, fabric merging with my skin. The forest floor shifted, roots winding around my ankles. The smell of pine and metal and burning filled my lungs until I could taste it. And I understood finally what was happening, what had always been happening since the moment I found that first coat in my closet. This wasn't an invasion, it was a return, a reclaiming. The coat hadn't appeared in my closet, I had appeared in its world, a temporary visitor now coming home. The last thing I remember clearly was reaching out to touch my reflection's hand. Our fingers met and the boundary between us dissolved. I felt myself spreading, thinning, becoming part of something vast and ancient that wore human form only when convenient. Now I hang in a closet beside other coats. I wait for someone to notice me, to touch my fabric and wonder about the dampness, the strange smell. To find the photograph I keep in my pocket, their own image, sleeping peacefully, unaware of my watching. Soon they will put me on, soon I will show them the door. Soon they will join us, and the cycle will continue as it always has, as it always must. After all, everyone needs a coat to keep them warm in the dark. Story 7. It crunched the same way every night, heavy footsteps, slow and uneven, but no lights, no car, and the gravel always looked undisturbed by morning. Still, each time I passed the front window, the sound started up again, right on cue. The air in the room would grow cold and sour like old rain. My first instinct was to blame the neighbor's cat, a scraggly black thing with yellow eyes that watched me from the fence line. But Cat stepped lightly, and this was the weight of a full-grown man dragging something heavy behind him. I began avoiding the window after sunset. The house became a maze of alternative pathways and strategic movements. Life continued in this careful balance until the night my phone died mid-conversation with my sister and I needed the charger from the front room. Just one quick dash, I told myself. The sound wouldn't have time to start. I was wrong. The crunch began immediately, but different this time, faster, almost eager. The footsteps accelerated with each step I took toward the window. My breath fogged the glass as I peered out. The driveway appeared empty under the pale moonlight, yet the gravel continued to shift and turn as if excavated by invisible hands. That night I slept with my bedroom door locked, a chair wedged beneath the handle. In the quiet hours before dawn, my phone awakened with notifications despite being powered off. Voice messages from unknown numbers filled my screen, each one containing nothing but the sound of gravel being crushed underneath something heavy. I deleted them all and pretended not to notice how the delete button felt slightly sticky against my finger, as if coated with something damp. The next day I bought security cameras, 4 of them, and positioned them around the perimeter of the house. The installation took the entire afternoon, my hands trembling as I mounted each device. The instruction manual promised peace of mind in bold lettering. I wondered if the manufacturers knew how hollow those words could be. The camera is connected to an app on my phone. That night I sat in my bedroom, the blue glow of the screen illuminating my face as I watched the empty driveway. Nothing moved, the gravel remained still. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to relax. Then I heard the familiar crunch of footsteps directly beneath my window, now rather than at the front of the house, far from where the cameras pointed. The sound circled the house, moving from window to window, as if whatever made it knew exactly where the blind spots were. I checked the camera footage again and noticed something I had missed. In the bottom corner of the frame, almost out of view, the gravel seemed to depress slightly, as if under invisible weight. The depressions formed a clear path toward my front door. I began documenting everything. A notebook became my constant companion. I recorded when the sounds occurred, their duration, their intensity. Pages filled with observations, theories, desperate attempts to make sense of something that defied explanation. The sound begins only when I'm looking at the window, I wrote one night. It knows when I'm watching. The following morning, I found my notebook open to a page I didn't remember writing. In my handwriting, but not quite right, the letters slightly malformed were the words, "I know when you're watching too." I burned the notebook in the kitchen sink. The pages curled and blackened, but the ink of those words seemed to resist the flames longer than the rest. That night I covered every window in the house with sheets, securing them with duct tape along the edges. The fabric billowed slightly, as if stirred by a breeze, though the house was sealed tight against the autumn chill. For several nights this seemed to work. The sounds stopped. I began sleeping again, though never deeply, always hovering at the edge of consciousness, ready to run, though from what or to where remained unclear. Then came the night when I awoke to find all the sheets had been removed from the windows. They lay folded neatly at the foot of my bed, duct tape still attached to their edges, forming perfect squares. The gravel began to crunch before I could even process what I was seeing. It sounded different now, almost like laughter. I decided to confront whatever was out there, armed with nothing but a flashlight and the foolish courage of the truly desperate. I stepped onto the front porch. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing the empty driveway. The crunching stopped immediately. "What do you want?" I shouted into the silence. The air thickened around me, pressing against my skin like damp cloth. The flashlight dimmed, then brightened again, though I hadn't touched the switch. I swept the beam across the driveway once more and caught a glimpse of something that made my heart stutter, a single footprint in the gravel, much larger than my own, pointing toward the house. As I watched, the stones around it began to shift, forming another print, then another, advancing toward me. I retreated inside, slamming the door. The lock clicked into place, a hollow comfort against whatever waited outside. That night I sat with my back against the door, listening as the footsteps circled the house, pausing at each window before moving on. The pattern repeated until dawn broke. When sunlight finally spilled across the driveway, the gravel looked pristine, undisturbed. I began to question my sanity. Perhaps grief or stress had finally caught up with me. I scheduled an appointment with a doctor who prescribed pills that dulled my senses and helped me sleep. For a few nights, the medication pushed me under so deeply that I didn't hear the gravel at all. But the dreams came instead. In these dreams, I walked across the driveway myself, my feet crunching heavily on the stones. Only they weren't my feet, they were too large, too heavy, and they moved with a purpose that wasn't mine. And the house I approached wasn't mine either, though it looked identical from the outside. Through the windows, I could see someone who looked exactly like me, sleeping peacefully, unaware. I would wake from these dreams drenched in sweat, my throat raw as if I'd been shouting. The sheets beneath me felt gritty, tiny pebbles digging into my skin. One morning, I found gravel in my hair, under my fingernails, between my teeth. I stopped taking the medication after that. Better to face the nightmare awake than to become part of it in sleep. The day I found my own footprints leading from the driveway to the house, muddy and mixed with gravel, was the day I knew I couldn't stay any longer. The tracks led straight to my bed, where a depression in the mattress suggested someone had sat watching me sleep. The indent wasn't mine, it was too large, too deep. I packed a bag with essentials, clothes, toiletries, the remaining pills just in case. As I zipped the bag closed, I noticed something wedged in the side pocket, a small leather-bound notebook I didn't recognize. Inside, in handwriting that was almost but not quite my own, was a detailed account of someone watching me through the windows of my house. The entries dated back months, long before I'd first heard the gravel shifting. The final entry read, "Tonight I'll try something new. I'll become the watcher instead of the watched. I'll take the gravel with me as a reminder." My hands trembled as I closed the notebook. In the front hallway, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. For a moment, just a flicker, my face seemed wrong, as if wearing an expression I hadn't chosen. I left without looking back, the sound of gravel crunching under my feet as I walked to my car. The sound seemed to echo, as if someone walked beside me, matching my pace. I drove for hours, putting distance between myself and the house. When night fell, I checked into a small motel off the highway. The parking lot was paved with fresh asphalt, smooth and black, no gravel. That night I slept soundly for the first time in months. No dreams, no sounds. Until I woke to use the bathroom and passed by the window. The crunch was unmistakable, heavy footsteps on gravel that shouldn't be there. The air in the room turned cold and sour. When I peered through the curtains, the smooth asphalt of the parking lot was gone, replaced by a familiar layer of gray gravel that caught the moonlight like teeth. And there, at the edge of the lot, a figure stood watching its outline familiar in a way that made my stomach turn. It raised a hand in greeting, the gesture a perfect mirror of my own. I let the curtain fall and backed away from the window. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked wrong again, the eyes too eager, the smile not mine. Behind me, I heard the gravel shift and turn. No longer outside, but in the room with me. I didn't need to turn around to know what I would see. The footsteps approached slowly, heavily, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. The gravel had followed me, or perhaps I had brought it with me all along. Either way, we were inseparable now, the watcher and the watched, trapped in an endless cycle. And somewhere in a house with covered windows and pristine gravel that never seemed disturbed, someone who looked exactly like me was finally sleeping peacefully, free at last. While I remained awake, listening to the sound of my own footsteps as they circled endlessly, searching for a way back to a life that was no longer mine. Story 8, I used to think it was just loose, but even on the stillest nights it creaked forward, then back slow and steady, like someone waiting. I took it inside once, locked the door. The next morning it was back on the porch, facing the window. At first I dismissed it as forgetfulness, a lapse in memory, nothing more. Perhaps I hadn't moved it after all. The mind plays tricks when you live alone in a house that groans with every shift in temperature. But deep down I knew better. I remembered carrying that heavy wooden rocking chair through the narrow hallway, feeling its weight in my arms, hearing the scrape of its legs against the floorboards. I remembered setting it down in the corner of my living room. I remembered locking the door. The chair had belonged to my grandmother, handcrafted with dark oak and intricate carvings along the armrest symbols I never quite understood. When I inherited the house, the chair came with it, already positioned on the front porch as if it had always belonged there, as if it had been waiting. That night I decided to document what was happening. I set up my phone on the windowsill, camera directed at the rocking chair, and started recording. The quality wasn't great in the darkness, but it would capture any movement. I checked the weather forecast, not even a breeze predicted. Perfect conditions to test my sanity. Sleep came reluctantly that night. My dreams were filled with the sound of wood creaking against wood, rhythmic and patient. When morning arrived, I rushed to the window. The chair remained motionless on the porch, exactly where I had left it. Relief washed over me until I checked the recording. The video showed nothing for the first few hours. Then, at what must have been around midnight, a shadow fell across the porch. Not a person, something less defined, like a smudge of darkness that didn't belong. And then slowly the chair began to rock. Forward, back, no wind, no visible cause, just steady, purposeful movement. I deleted the video immediately. Some truths aren't meant to be preserved. The next day I examined the chair more carefully. The wood felt unnaturally cold beneath my fingers, despite the warmth of the day. I ran my hands along the carvings, tracing patterns that seemed to shift under my touch. Were there more symbols now? Had they always formed this particular arrangement? I couldn't be sure. Under the seat, I discovered something I hadn't noticed before: a small compartment sealed shut. No visible hinges or lock, just a thin line marking its existence. I pressed against it, tried to pry it open with my fingernails, but it wouldn't budge. Whatever secrets the chair held, it wasn't ready to reveal them. That night I decided on a more drastic approach. I dragged the chair to my car, drove several miles away to an abandoned field, and left it there. The action felt like betrayal, like abandoning a family heirloom. But as I drove away, watching the silhouette of the chair grow smaller in my rearview mirror, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The feeling didn't last. I woke to the familiar sound of creaking, slow, methodical rocking from the front porch. I didn't need to look to know what I would find, but I did anyway. There it was, mudded and scratched, with grass stains on its legs, facing the window, watching. My hands shook as I made coffee that morning. The normality of the routine felt absurd against the impossibility of what was happening. I considered calling someone, a friend, a specialist in paranormal phenomena, but what would I say? My rocking chair keeps coming back. They would think I was losing my mind. Perhaps I was. I began to keep a journal documenting everything that happened with the chair, its movements, the patterns of its rocking, any changes in the carvings. I took photographs, although they never seemed to capture the details correctly, always coming out blurred or distorted. In my notes, I started to see patterns emerging. The chair rocked more vigorously on certain nights. It seemed to respond when I spoke aloud, pausing in its movement as if listening. One evening, almost without thinking, I sat in it. The wood felt alive beneath me, vibrating with subtle energy. The rocking motion began on its own, gentle at first, then stronger. I tried to stand, but found myself unable to move, as if invisible hands held me in place. The world around me began to blur, colors smearing like wet paint. And then I heard it, a whisper, so faint I could have imagined it, speaking words in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood. It wanted something from me, something only I could provide. When I finally managed to break free, stumbling away from the chair with my heart pounding, I noticed something had changed. A small crack had appeared in the hidden compartment beneath the seat. Whatever was sealed inside was working its way out. That night I dreamed of my grandmother, not as I had known her, frail and soft-spoken, but younger, standing tall with fierce determination in her eyes. In the dream, she was carving the symbols into the chair, her hands moving with practiced precision. She wasn't creating the patterns, she was containing something within them, trapping it. And now, generations later, the seals were breaking. I woke drenched in sweat, the sheets twisted around my legs. Outside, the rocking chair moved with newfound intensity, the wood creaking in protest against its own motion. Something had changed. Whatever patience the chair or what dwelled within it had possessed was running out. In desperation, I turned to research. My grandmother had left boxes of old journals and letters in the attic, untouched since her passing. I spent days sifting through them, searching for any mention of the chair. Most entries were mundane accounts of daily life, but then I found it a leather-bound journal with entries dating back decades. The handwriting was different from my grandmother's, older and more formal, her mother's perhaps. The journal spoke of an encounter with a traveling craftsman who offered to make a chair of extraordinary quality, a chair that would last generations. All he required was permission to incorporate his own design symbols of protection, he claimed, but the writer suspected otherwise. The craftsman had seemed too eager, his eyes never quite meeting hers. After the chair was completed, strange things began to happen in the house. Items moved on their own. Whispers echoed through empty rooms. And the chair rocked even when no one sat in it. The final entry described a ritual performed to bind whatever entity had been worked into the wood. It hadn't banished the presence, merely contained it. The warning was clear. The binding would weaken over time. Future generations would need to renew it. My grandmother must have performed the ritual during her lifetime. Now it was my responsibility. The journal provided instructions, specific herbs to burn, words to speak, symbols to refresh. But one detail made my blood run cold. The ritual required blood from the current owner of the house, my blood, to strengthen the binding. I gathered what I needed, following the journal's instructions precisely. As night fell, I approached the chair, which had gone eerily still, as if aware of my intentions. The compartment beneath the seat had opened further, revealing darkness deeper than should have been possible in such a small space. With trembling hands, I began the ritual. I burned the herbs, spoke the words, and then, hesitating only briefly, cut my palm and let the blood drip onto the carvings. They seemed to absorb it, the wood darkening where the drops fell. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the chair began to shake violently, its wooden frame contorting as if under immense pressure. The darkness from the compartment spilled out like liquid shadow, forming shapes that hurt my eyes to look at directly. The air grew thick and cold, making each breath a struggle. I continued the ritual, my voice growing stronger as I repeated the binding words. The darkness fought against them, reaching tendrils toward me that I could feel brushing against my mind, offering whispered promises of knowledge and power. Somehow I resisted. I completed the ritual, pressing my bleeding hand against the final symbol. A sound like a scream tore through the air, not human, not animal, but something ancient and furious at being contained once more. The darkness receded, pulled back into the compartment, which snapped shut with such force that the chair itself cracked down the middle. When it was over, I collapsed beside the now silent chair, exhausted beyond measure. The binding had worked, but I knew it wasn't permanent. Just as my grandmother had done, I had only bought time. Someday, perhaps long after I was gone, the binding would weaken again. Someone else would face what I had faced. I still keep the chair on my porch. The crack has healed itself, though a faint line remains visible if you know where to look. Sometimes I think I see the symbols shifting, rearranging themselves beneath the surface of the wood. The chair doesn't rock anymore, at least, not when anyone's watching. But sometimes when I wake in the deepest part of night, I hear it, creaking forward then back, slow and patient, waiting. And I wonder what will happen when the binding breaks again, and if whoever lives here then will understand what needs to be done. I've left my own journal, of course, hidden where I hope they'll find it. A record of what happened, what I did, what they'll need to do. For now, though, the chair sits still when the wind blows, and that's how I know the binding holds. But I never sit in it, never touch it, and I always check each morning and night to make sure it's still facing away from the window. Story 9, I dropped my keys behind it and moved the fridge to reach them. But instead of tile, I found plywood nailed over a dark square. I tapped it, hollow. When I pressed my ear to the surface, I heard a soft shuffle, like skin dragging across wood. The scent of dirt and something raw crept up through the seams. My mind raced with possibilities, a utility access, some forgotten storage space. The previous owners never mentioned anything unusual about the kitchen. I ran my fingers along the edge of the plywood, feeling the rough edges of nails hammered with urgency rather than precision. I returned with a crowbar from the garage, prying gently at first, then with increasing force as the plywood resisted. The nails screeched against the metal, filling the kitchen with their protest. One corner lifted, and the smell intensified, earthy damp, with an underlying sweetness that made my stomach turn. That's when I noticed the silence. The usual background hum of the refrigerator had stopped. The digital clock on the microwave remained blank despite being plugged in. Even the distant sounds of neighborhood activity had fallen away, replaced by a profound stillness that felt almost physical, pressing against my eardrums. I should have replaced the plywood then. I should have pushed the refrigerator back and forgotten about it. Instead, I wedged the crowbar deeper, leveraging my weight until the wood gave way with a sudden crack that sent me stumbling backward. The opening was perfectly square, about 3 feet across. No ladder descended into the darkness below. No pipes or wires explained its purpose, just emptiness stretching downward beyond the reach of light. I retrieved my phone, switching on its flashlight, but the beam seemed to dissipate just inches into the hole, as if the darkness had substance, swallowing the light. I lowered my phone on its charging cable, watching the screen. For a moment, nothing. Then a flicker of movement caught my eye, something pale shifting just at the edge of visibility. The phone jerked, pulling the cable taut. I yanked it back, the screen now black, battery drained completely. That night sleep eluded me. Every creak of the house, every natural settling sound became magnified. I convinced myself I was being irrational. Houses have crawl spaces, access panels, architectural oddities. Nothing sinister about finding one. Morning brought rationality and a plan. I would document everything properly, then contact a home inspector. I carried my coffee to the kitchen, nearly dropping the mug when I saw the refrigerator had moved back to its original position. The linoleum floor appeared intact, with no sign of the plywood or the opening I discovered. I set down my coffee and pushed against the refrigerator. It didn't budge. I pushed harder, throwing my shoulder into it, but it remained fixed in place as if welded to the floor. The surface felt unnaturally cold against my palms, frost forming where my skin made contact. "This isn't happening," I whispered, my breath visible in the suddenly chilled air. I retreated to my office, searching property records online. The house history revealed nothing unusual: a succession of owners, none staying longer than 5 years. No deaths, no incidents, nothing to explain what I'd found. That evening I noticed water collecting around the base of the refrigerator, dark and viscous. Not water, something thicker. It smelled of iron and earth. I followed the trail with a paper towel, watching as it vanished before my eyes, the floor absorbing it like parched soil. I recorded everything in a journal, documenting each anomaly with clinical detachment. The cold spots that appeared throughout the house, the subtle shifting of furniture when I turned away, the persistent smell of soil that clung to my clothes, the shadows that seemed to move independently of light sources. My recording equipment captured sounds too faint for human ears, whispering that, when amplified, revealed no discernible words but conveyed unmistakable intent. The bathroom mirror showed a face that moved a fraction slower than my own, smile lingering after mine had faded. I stopped answering phone calls, stopped checking emails. The outside world seemed increasingly irrelevant compared to understanding what existed beneath my kitchen floor. I found myself returning to the refrigerator, pressing my ear against its humming surface, listening for echoes from below. Sometimes I swore I could hear the shuffle of movement, like something crawling upward through darkness. My dreams filled with tunnels and passages, all leading downward. In these dreams, I descended willingly into darkness, guided by a familiarity I couldn't explain. Each morning, I discovered dirt under my fingernails, my feet caked with soil that matched nothing from my garden. I tried leaving once, packed a bag, started the car. The engine died before I reached the end of the driveway. No matter how many times I turned the key, it wouldn't restart. Walking felt impossible, each step away from the house requiring more effort than the last, as if I were wading through quicksand. The neighbors stopped waving. Their gazes slid past my house as if it weren't there. Packages piled up on the porch, uncollected. Mail overflowed the box. I watched from windows that grew increasingly opaque with a film that resisted cleaning. I needed to see beneath the floor again. The compulsion grew until it consumed every thought. I attacked the refrigerator with renewed determination, leveraging tools against its unyielding mass. When metal proved useless, I used my hands, tearing at the linoleum until my fingers bled. The floor yielded suddenly, peeling away like skin to reveal the square opening, now wider than I remembered. No plywood covered it this time, just emptiness, breathing cold air into my kitchen. I lowered a camera on a string, watching the feed on my laptop. The darkness shifted, formed patterns, resolved into walls of packed earth lined with roots that moved like fingers. The camera swung, revealing a chamber larger than my entire house, filled with objects I initially mistook for furniture. They weren't furniture. They were remnants, possessions, items belonging to other owners, I realized, arranged in careful, concentric circles around a central point the camera couldn't quite capture. The string snapped, the laptop screen exploded into static before going black. That night, the noises from below grew bolder, no longer content with shuffling, now advancing to scratching directly beneath the floorboards of every room. I barricaded myself in the bedroom, pushing the dresser against the door, though I knew whatever hunted me didn't need doors. I woke to find the hole had spread, no longer confined to the kitchen. Openings appeared throughout the house in corners of rooms, behind bookshelves, under the bathtub, each revealing the same darkness, the same earthy scent, the same patient waiting. My journal entries became increasingly disjointed. I found pages filled with writing I didn't remember, diagrams of tunnels stretching beneath neighboring houses, the entire street, expanding outward like roots from a central point, my house. I realize now what draws me to the opening, not curiosity but recognition. Whatever waits below has been waiting specifically for me, has drawn others before me. The house doesn't trap its owners, it selects them. I've gathered my remaining possessions in the center of the living room, arranged in a perfect circle. My contribution to the collection below, my acknowledgement of understanding. The floor throughout the house has transformed, hardened like scabbed tissue preparing to peel away. I sit now in the kitchen, watching as the refrigerator slides aside on its own, revealing the opening that no longer appears as a square, but as a perfect silhouette of my body. An invitation tailored just for me. I know I will descend. I know others will come after me, drawn to this house with its too affordable price and charming facade. They'll discover their own anomalies, perhaps not a hollow space beneath the refrigerator, but something equally impossible to ignore. And like me, they'll document it all, convince themselves they're investigating rather than surrendering, believe they're acting out of choice rather than compulsion. The opening waits, patient and permanent. I'm ready now to discover what lives beneath the surface of things, what breathes in spaces we pave over and pretend don't exist. What has chosen me from all the others who placed their keys in the lock and called this place home. I extend my foot over the threshold, feeling a cool current rise to meet it. The darkness below reaches up, wrapping around my ankle like a welcoming hand. It doesn't pull, it doesn't need to. I'm already leaning forward, already falling. The kitchen floor seals seamlessly behind me. Story 10. The gentle patter of autumn rain whispered against my office window as I immersed myself in my study. It was a night when time itself seemed to slow down, embraced by a symphony of raindrops that wove a soothing, almost hypnotic melody. The warm glow from my desk lamp bathed the aged paper of historical manuscripts I diligently cataloged for the city's archive in a soft, golden light. And it was then, in that tranquil moment, that she appeared. A solitary figure crossed the square below, her scarlet-red umbrella a striking contrast against the muted palette of autumnal grays and browns. There was a certain grace to her stride, a rhythm to her steps that harmonized effortlessly with the falling rain. Every evening, like clockwork, she traversed the square, becoming a familiar presence in my nightly routine, a mystery I eagerly anticipated unfolding. Her face remained veiled by the shadow of the umbrella and the mist of rain that shrouded her every move. But one evening, as she paused in the center of the square, a fleeting glance in my direction revealed a hint of a smile on her pale features, illuminated by the soft glow of street lamps. My heart skipped a beat before she continued on her path, disappearing into the cloak of evening fog. In the days that followed, subtle disturbances began to manifest around me. Water droplets appeared on the manuscripts I handled, as if touched by rain-dampened fingers. The delicate fragrance of antique roses lingered in the air, lingering long into the night even with windows tightly shut. And then one evening, a mysterious black and white photograph materialized on my desk, depicting the square half a century ago, with a figure bearing a red umbrella standing out amidst the monochrome crowd. Intrigued, I delved into the archives, uncovering the tale of Sarah Thompson, a young librarian who once graced the halls of my very building. Known for her crimson umbrella and love for ancient tomes, her life had met a tragic end in that very square on a rainy night, much like the ones I now experienced. As I immersed myself in her story, the scent of roses grew more potent, and the rain outside seemed to take on a melodic quality, as though a forgotten lullaby hummed softly in the background. The pages of the documents I perused fluttered as if touched by an unseen hand, and when I glanced up, there she was, closer than ever before. The red umbrella lay folded by her side, revealing a face etched with kindness and a smile of tranquil wisdom. No fear gripped me, only a profound sense of empathy and connection. From that evening on, the woman with the red umbrella ceased her nightly crossings of the square. Yet on rainy nights, when the archive was cloaked in silence and shadows danced along the walls, I could sense her presence lingering. The echo of her footsteps, the faint perfume of roses, remnants of a bygone era, whispered through the halls. Sometimes, as I sifted through ancient documents, I would discover fresh droplets of water on the pages, as if a spectral hand had just grazed the paper with rain-kissed fingertips. I often pondered whether Sarah still watched over her cherished books, her spirit continuing to wander in the rain with her iconic red umbrella. This tale, a secret shared solely between myself and the library's shadowy alcoves, remained untold to others. And whenever the rain painted patterns on my window panes, a knowing smile would grace my lips, acknowledging that somewhere in the tapestry of time, a woman with a red umbrella strolled eternally. The patter of rain against the glass, the whispers of the past that lingered in the air, these were the echoes of a story woven through time, a story of a librarian and her beloved books, of a gentle spirit still adrift in the rain-soaked streets of memory. Story 11, the soft glow of the candle flickered, casting mysterious shadows on the ancient stone walls as I descended into the depths of the cellar. Each step I took echoed softly, the familiar creak of the wooden stairs a comforting companion on my nightly journey to retrieve Grandma's preserves. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of earth and aged wood, transporting me back to the days of my youth. But on this particular evening, a subtle shift lingered in the air, a whisper of something unknown. The flame danced erratically, unaffected by any breeze, while a fine layer of dust settled upon every surface, though I had only been there the day before. The shadows seemed to elongate, reaching out into the darkness at the foot of the stairs, beckoning me forward. Pausing midway down, a peculiar sensation washed over me. The shelves that typically ended after a short distance now extended further than I remembered, disappearing into an unseen expanse. The flickering candlelight failed to penetrate the depths, creating an illusion of an elongated corridor before me. The silence enveloped me, broken only by the steady rhythm of my heartbeat and the distant drip of water seeping through the stones. Driven by a curious impulse that overpowered my trepidation, I pressed on. The jars of preserves gleamed dimly in the wavering light, their labels bearing dates of years long past. 1980, 1960, 1940, some so faded they were illegible. The air grew colder, carrying a musty scent mingled with the aroma of ancient parchment. The shelves continued to stretch into the abyss, revealing walls adorned with intricate patterns of ancient bricks and enigmatic symbols engraved with a precision defying the era of the house's construction. Coming to a halt before a particular shelf, my gaze fixated on a singular jar. Crafted from dark glass that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, the label remained surprisingly intact, displaying an inexplicable date, 1820. Tremors coursed through my hands as I lifted it, and in the cellar's hush, a faint whisper, wordless yet profound, brushed against my ears. It resembled the gentle flow of time, akin to the rustle of ancient pages stirred by a breeze. Turning slowly, a fleeting vision blurred before me, ethereal figures flickering in the shadows as if yearning to materialize. Sensing a shift in the atmosphere, I resolved to retrace my steps. Yet as I pivoted towards the stairs, a disquieting realization dawned upon me. The distance I had traversed had inexplicably multiplied, the light at the staircase's summit reduced to a mere speck, distant as a star in a moonless sky. Maintaining composure, I began the ascent, each step a deliberate act akin to a childhood ritual. The surroundings transformed gradually, the jar's dates shifting to more recent years, the walls reverting to their familiar state. Clutching the 1820 jar, its weight grounding me in reality, I reached the top of the stairs. The warm glow of the kitchen enveloped me, offering solace akin to a tender embrace. Placing the jar on the first step, I glanced back into the cellar's shadows. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of movement caught my eye, a distortion in the fabric of time itself. That night, seated at the kitchen table with a steaming cup of tea cradled in my hands, I pondered the events that had transpired. The jar now bore a simple label, Blackberry Jam 2023, yet upon opening it, a fragrance unlike any other wafted forth a scent redolent of time itself, sweet and ancient, reminiscent of childhood memories long forgotten. Since that night, each descent into the cellar stirs a sense of anticipation, a question lingering in the depths of my mind. The stairs remain unchanged, the preserves familiar, yet in moments of dim light and profound silence, I sense the cellar's latent mystery, as though it awaits my return, prepared to unveil further temporal enigmas. Someday, perhaps, I will summon the courage to venture down that seemingly infinite corridor, to unravel the secrets concealed at the nexus where time loses its meaning. Story 12. Snow fell softly outside my quaint antique shop that evening. The flakes pirouetted behind the windows, basking in the warm glow of vintage lamps, casting a gentle and inviting aura. The aged wooden shelves murmured a soft creak, harmonizing with the unhurried beat of the pendulum clock's hands. The air carried a nostalgic perfume of old books and beeswax, a scent unique to objects steeped in history. As I arranged the volumes, the doorbell chimed with a crystalline melody, breaking the stillness. A rush of cold air whispered into the shop, bringing with it a few snowflakes that dissolved into tiny pools on the wooden floor. Turning to greet the visitor, I was momentarily taken aback. Standing at the threshold was a tall figure cloaked in darkness, seemingly absorbing the light around them. A broad-brimmed hat shielded their upper features, while a gray wool scarf concealed the lower half of their face. "Good evening," I murmured, striving to maintain a composed demeanor despite a subtle prickle of unease creeping along my spine. The visitor remained silent, gliding gracefully through the aisles, their gloved hands gracefully skimming over the displayed artifacts. There was a mesmerizing quality to their movements, as if they danced to an enigmatic melody known only to them. I found myself entranced, captivated by their fluid gestures and the peculiar way light seemed to behave in their presence. Shadows deepened and thickened, assuming a life of their own. Pausing before an antique mirror, a relic from the 18th century acquired just the week prior, the visitor's gloved fingers traced the golden frame with deliberate care. The shop fell into a profound silence, punctuated solely by the measured tick-tock of the clock, each beat elongating. Curiosity tugged at me, prompting a glance at their reflection in the mirror, only to find an unsettling absence. The mirror revealed nothing but the shelf behind them, as if they existed beyond the realm of reflection. Approaching tentatively, the floor whispering beneath each step, I inquired, "May I assist you in finding something specific?" My voice held an uncharacteristic hush. Slowly, the visitor pivoted towards me, shadows cloaking where features should be. With a fluid motion, they withdrew a weathered parchment from their coat pocket, unfolding it with care on the counter beside the cash register. The script upon it was ornate and archaic, listing peculiar items: a mirror that remembers, a clock that counts backwards, a key that unlocks forgotten doors. Reading the list, I sensed a chill pervade the air, my breath materializing in wisps. The objects on the shelves seemed to stir imperceptibly, as if recognizing a kinship with the visitor. "I apologize," I murmured, "but I fear I do not possess these specific items." The visitor remained motionless, a statue in the quietude, before nodding slowly. Retrieving the parchment, they tucked it away with the same grace it was revealed. Making their way to the exit, the visitor paused before departing. With a slight turn, a whisper emerged from the depths of the scarf, more akin to a thought than a voice. "You will." It bore no doubt, only a certainty. As the bell tolled upon their departure, its timbre seemed altered, resonating from a distant place. Outside, the snow fell unabated, yet for a fleeting moment the flakes hovered, suspended in time. Later that night, after locking up the shop, I inspected the antique mirror. Its reflective surface appeared profound, hinting at concealed depths. The pendulum clock, the faithful keeper of time, had halted precisely at the moment the visitor had arrived. Since that night, as shadows lengthen and light wanes, I find myself gazing at the door, awaiting the bell's chime. Every object in the shop, it seems, shares in this vigil, as if anticipating the inevitable return of the mysterious visitor. In an antique shop, each object whispers a tale, and perhaps, just perhaps, some objects await the commencement of their own story. Story 13. The November rain softly tapped against the windows of Grandma Rose's attic, crafting a natural lullaby that always brought a sense of tranquility to my soul. Returning to the attic after many years to sort through her belongings, now that she had departed, I was enveloped by the scent of aged wood and weathered books lingering in the air. The dim light of twilight seeped through the half-closed shutters, casting dancing shadows on the faded vintage wallpaper. Nestled in a corner beneath a thin veil of dust was the old brass record player Grandma cherished, its surface gleaming like a mirror. An artifact from a bygone era, adorned with intricate floral patterns on its mechanical arm and a turntable flawlessly preserved. Beside it, a collection of vinyl records neatly housed in time-worn cardboard sleeves. As I sifted through the records, my fingertips paused on one in particular. The cover was a pure white canvas, devoid of any title or author, save for a delicate golden border that shimmered in the subdued light. Though unfamiliar to me, I knew Grandma Rose's collection by heart. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, I resolved to listen to it. The record player sprang to life with a gentle, familiar hum. Carefully, I set the mysterious record on the turntable and lowered the arm. Initially, only the customary crackle of vinyl filled the room, then the music commenced. It was a melody unknown to my ears, a waltz performed on the piano, yet there was an enigmatic quality to the way the notes intertwined. The music seemed to shift subtly with each revolution of the record, as if the notes rearranged themselves into new harmonies. Surrendering to the captivating composition, I closed my eyes. A hint of jasmine, Grandma Rose's beloved flower, seemed to waft through the air, a perplexing sensation given the wintry season. Upon reopening my eyes, I observed the shadows in the room moving in an unconventional manner, no longer dictated by the fading daylight but swaying to the rhythm of the enigmatic melody. Before me, on the wall, a figure's shadow twirled in a dance, despite my solitary presence. The waltz persisted, yet now amidst the piano's notes, I discerned the faint echo of a laughter I knew well. It was Grandma Rose's laughter, vivid and unmistakable as ever. A quiver tingled down my spine, not of fear, but of a peculiar blend of nostalgia and awe. Rising from the armchair, I approached the window. In the glass's reflection, the room lay behind me, yet for an instant I glimpsed Grandma Rose, youthful and resplendent in her cherished dance attire, spinning gracefully in the heart of the attic. When I turned around, the room was predictably empty. The record played on until its final note dissipated into silence, leaving a transformed ambience in its wake. The space felt warmer, more animated, as if that fleeting musical interlude had roused dormant memories within the very walls of the house. That night, as I returned the enigmatic record to its white sleeve, a previously unnoticed detail caught my eye. Along the inner edge, penned in Grandma Rose's elegant script, was a date, her wedding day. Beneath it, in nearly imperceptible letters, a phrase emerged: "Music is the key to our most cherished memories." Since then, on each visit to the attic, I seek out that specific record. Sometimes it reveals itself readily, while other times it seems to play a game of hide-and-seek amidst the other vinyls. Each time I listen to it, the melody carries subtle variations, as if it harbors infinite renditions of the same recollection. I remain uncertain whether it was a special gift for Grandma Rose or something more mystical. Yet one thing remains undisputed. On those rainy evenings when the record player spins that mysterious tune, the attic becomes suffused with a delicate enchantment, momentarily blurring the line between now and then, reality and memory, akin to the fragile paper of an antiquated photograph. And perhaps in those fleeting moments, Grandma Rose continues to dance, perpetually youthful and joyous in an eternal waltz. Story 14. The rain's steady rhythm against my window had become a familiar companion during my late-night writing sessions. Each droplet traced silvery paths down the glass, creating an ever-shifting canvas of watery light. My desk lamp cast a warm amber glow around me, enveloping me in a sphere of gentle light, while the rest of the room remained shrouded in comforting shadows. I found myself developing a habit of watching the raindrops, seeking out patterns in their meandering trails. Sometimes, when my mind wandered from my work, I would let my imagination weave stories hidden within their crystalline paths. But on this particular night, the dance of the raindrops seemed different. The water flowed in unusual ways, as if guided by an unseen hand. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of my tired eyes, almost lulled into that peaceful state between wakefulness and dreams by the soft patter of rain. Yet as I continued to observe, the strange patterns grew more pronounced. The droplets seemed to avoid certain areas of the glass, creating dry spaces that slowly formed the outline of a figure. Curiosity piqued, I leaned in closer to the window. In the reflection, I could see not just the rain, but also the dim interior of my room behind me. And there, I noticed something peculiar about my own reflection. It seemed slightly out of sync with my movements, as if responding to them with a delay. The rain's whisper grew louder, filling my ears with its subtle melody. Transfixed, I watched as my reflection's hand reached out to touch the glass, a movement that my own hand did not mirror. It was a smooth, graceful gesture, as though following a choreography unknown to me. A soft warmth spread across my skin, contrasting with the cool air near the window. The features of my reflection began to shift, subtly changing into something both familiar and foreign. The eyes that met mine held a depth I had never seen before, a wisdom that seemed to transcend time itself. Staying perfectly still, I observed as my reflection underwent a gentle metamorphosis. The face lost all gender and age distinctions, becoming something timeless. The rain, like a flowing silver frame, circled around it, defying gravity in perfect harmony. In a fleeting moment, my desk lamp flickered, casting a brief dimness over the room, and in that darkness I felt a presence beside me, as tender as a mother's touch. When the light steadied, my reflection had returned to its normal state, mimicking my movements flawlessly. However, the rain persisted in those impossible circles, a lingering reminder of the extraordinary visitation. I remained by the window for hours, contemplating the experience. The presence I had felt lingered like a cherished melody, neither unsettling nor obtrusive. As dawn approached, the rain gradually ceased, leaving behind a window streaked with ordinary watermarks. Now on rainy nights, I find myself drawn to that window, leaving behind pen and paper on my desk. Sometimes, under the perfect conditions when the rainfall creates a mirror-like surface, I catch glimpses of that other self watching me through the glass. We share a silent understanding, my reflection and I, acknowledging that some mysteries are meant to be embraced rather than unraveled. The rain continues its descent, each droplet carrying the potential for another encounter. And in those moments of mutual observation, I wonder if, in another realm, another version of myself sits by their own window, yearning to catch a glimpse of my world through the silver threads of rain. Story 15. The night had enveloped the old house in a velvety shroud of quietness, broken only by the gentle patter of autumn rain against the window panes. Nestled in my cherished armchair, cradling a steaming cup of tea, I idly gazed at the painting hanging on the wall across from me. An heirloom from my grandmother, it depicted a woodland scene at dusk. Though not a valuable piece, it always captivated me with its ability to evoke a sense of wistful tranquility. That particular evening, as the golden glow of the floor lamp cast flickering shadows around the room, I noticed something peculiar. The painting appeared slightly askew to the right, though I could have sworn it had always hung perfectly straight. Setting down my cup on the nearby table, I rose slowly, causing the wooden floor to murmur softly beneath my feet as I drew near to the wall. With gentle care, I straightened the painting, my fingers tracing the weathered texture of its antique frame. Returning to my seat, I resumed the book I had momentarily abandoned. The warmth of the tea and the soothing rhythm of the raindrops outside lulled me into a pleasant drowsiness. It was only after some time, when I lifted my gaze, that I noticed the painting had tilted once more, this time to the left. A subtle chill ran down my spine as I tried to rationalize it as mere fatigue or a trick of light and shadow. Rising again, more cautiously this time, I approached the painting and observed something I had not seen before. The colors of the sunset seemed to pulse with vibrancy, and the tree shadows appeared elongated compared to earlier. With trembling fingers, I touched the canvas, feeling a warmth as if it had absorbed the room's heat, yet there was a peculiar quality to how the paint caught the light. In the days that followed, I found myself increasingly drawn to the painting. Each time I entered the room, it seemed to have shifted ever so slightly. Sometimes the change was barely perceptible, other times it was more pronounced. Not only did its tilt vary, but the details within the painting itself seemed to subtly alter. The density of the trees would shift, the clouds in the painted sky would morph in shape. I began documenting these changes with photographs taken every morning and evening, meticulously comparing them. The variances were slight but undeniable. Within the painted forest, ephemeral details emerged and vanished. A nest hidden among the branches, a secluded glade, a faint path that had not existed before. The sunset appeared to progress imperceptibly, as if time within the painting flowed at a cadence distinct from our own. On a particularly tranquil evening, ensconced in my usual armchair, I caught a movement out of the corner of my eye. The painting was tilting on its own, moving with a nearly imperceptible slowness. I felt not fear, but a profound curiosity mingled with an otherworldly calm. The motion was fluid, as if an unseen hand was tenderly caressing it. Drawing near to the painting once more, this time without hesitation, I sensed a faint vibration in the canvas under my gaze. In the reflection of the protective glass for a fleeting instant, I thought I glimpsed a familiar figure. The outline of my grandmother, faint and ethereal like a fading memory, seemed to smile as she adjusted the painting to its proper alignment. Since that moment, I have embraced these subtle changes as part of the house's enchantment. Each night, before retiring to bed, I devote a few moments to studying the painting, endeavoring to uncover its newfound secrets. At times, I believe it is my grandmother's way of signaling her enduring presence, watching over me through this enigmatic canvas that shifts and breathes like a living entity. I have kept this tale close to my heart, sharing it with none, opting to preserve this gentle mystery within. The painting continues to shift its position, though now less frequently, as if it has found a harmonious equilibrium between revealing itself and safeguarding its enigma. And so each evening I sit in my armchair with a steaming cup of tea, attuned to the rain's melodic cadence against the window panes, observing the painting that leads its own existence, engaged in a silent dialogue understood only by us two. Story 16, the autumn breeze whispered softly as I meandered along the rural road, bathed in the warm hues of a sunset sky. The GPS had long given up, but I wasn't troubled. Familiar with the area, or so I thought, I continued on. The dirt path curved gently amid hills adorned with vineyards stripped bare. A rush of crisp air wafted in through the cracked window, carrying the earthy fragrance of moist soil and fallen leaves. In that suspended moment, time seemed to stretch, allowing me to relish each fleeting second. Turning right at a weathered wooden sign, a sense of unease crept over me. This road was unfamiliar, absent from my mental map. Pausing to collect my bearings, the elongated shadows cast by the setting sun wove intricate patterns among the trees flanking the route. The asphalt beneath my tires was unusually flawless, too pristine for a neglected back road, devoid of potholes or imperfections, disappearing into the dusk's haze. Listless leaves pirouetted lazily in the air, as if time itself had slowed in this realm. Proceeding cautiously, I observed the surroundings with a growing intrigue. The trees bordering the road appeared ancient and twisted, their canopies interlacing overhead to form a natural tunnel through which filtered the dwindling twilight. In the distance, faint lights flickered like misplaced fireflies, flitting between the tree trunks, ephemeral apparitions vanishing as swiftly as they appeared. The silence was palpable, interrupted solely by the gentle hum of the engine and the rustle of leaves stirred by the breeze. Advancing further, the road underwent a subtle transformation, its boundaries blurred as if softened by an unseen hand. Shadows deepened, yet not menacingly so. Reality seemed to be mellowing, its edges losing definition. Abruptly, a glint caught my eye, an ancient brass mailbox, gleaming as if new, adorned with an intricate compass rose engraving. Upon reaching out to touch it, a faint warmth seemed to radiate from the metal, contrasting the cool evening air. The road continued its serpentine path, revealing ever more peculiar details. Dimly glowing milestone markers at the roadside appeared to emit light from within, rather than merely reflecting it. The firmament above me bore an indescribable hue, a shade exclusive to this forgotten enclave. Stars timidly emerged, yet even they appeared altered, as though belonging to a different era or realm. After what felt like an eternity or perhaps a mere moment, I crested a hill, unveiling a small circular clearing paved with weathered stones. At its center stood an aged wrought iron lamppost, casting a welcoming, warm glow. Halting the car, I stepped out into an exceptionally tranquil atmosphere, as if time itself had paused its relentless march. From my vantage point, the distant city lights glimmered faintly, as though belonging to a separate reality veiled from this one. Surveying the panorama, I noticed the road behind me had transformed. No longer smooth asphalt, but a cobblestone path worn by countless footsteps. Yet I was certain it had been modern just moments earlier. Retrieving the road map from the glove compartment, I scrutinized it beneath the lamppost's light. As suspected, this road eluded the map's confines as though existing solely in dreams. Folding the map, a gust of wind caused it to quiver in my grasp. Fleetingly, golden lines seemed to materialize on the paper, tracing a path that faintly glowed before vanishing. Startled, I blinked, only to find the image had dissipated. Remaining in that surreal haven a while longer, I basked in the tranquility it exuded. Eventually deciding to depart, I noticed the lamppost had extinguished silently. The road ahead lay shrouded in darkness, yet an innate certainty assured me it would guide me home. As I drove towards the city, I glanced back several times in the rearview mirror. The lamppost had reignited, its glow dimming as I distanced myself. A golden shimmer danced in the air, as if stardust had been scattered upon the road unmarked on any map. In the ensuing days, I endeavored to locate that road anew, scouring the countryside for hours, exploring every fork and byway. Yet that solitary lamppost and its luminous stones had vanished like a wisp of a dream upon waking. A mere hint of my journey remained, a faint golden trail on my aged map, visible only when illuminated, just so a clandestine secret awaiting rediscovery. Story 17. The autumn mist draped the streets like a soft, gray shroud, casting a mysterious aura over the night. After a long day's work, I found myself navigating through the fog, the streetlights obscured into hazy halos around me. It was then that I noticed a pair of headlights behind me, their glow steady and unchanging. A peculiar sensation crept into my mind, hinting at something peculiar about the unwavering distance that car maintained behind me as I weaved through the labyrinthine roads. The gentle hum of the engine trailed behind me like a patient companion, matching the cadence of my journey with eerie precision. Each time I slowed down, it mirrored my pace. Each slight acceleration was mimicked in kind. In the mirror, I could discern only a shadowy outline, a sedan perhaps, its headlights resembling vigilant eyes fixed upon me. As I passed by the quiet houses, their stillness exuding a sense of calm that clashed with my growing disquiet, I made a decision. Instead of veering onto my usual route, I ventured straight ahead, extending my path. And still the car followed, maintaining that hypnotic proximity that now felt almost intimate. The pitter-patter of rain on the windshield added a soothing backdrop, a stark contrast to the unfolding strangeness. Raindrops streaked down the glass, further distorting my view of the unyielding presence tailing me. I made turns, one after the other, the car mimicking my movements as if tethered by an unseen thread. The headlights trailed behind, a constant yet distant companion in our nocturnal ballet. At a red light, I stole a glance through the rain-splattered window, catching a glimpse of a figure in the driver's seat, motionless and enigmatic. When I eventually decided to return home, the car remained, a faithful shadow in the night. Pulling into my driveway and cutting the engine, a heavy silence enveloped me, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of rain on the car roof and the thud of my own heartbeat. Through the mirror, I watched as the car gently halted several yards away, its headlights piercing the darkness like watchful eyes. Minutes stretched into eternity, the tension palpable in the air. And then, with a gradual deliberateness, the headlights dimmed, plunging the street into obscurity. The silhouette of the vehicle lingered in the shadows, a spectral presence in the night. Summoning my resolve, I stepped out into the rain, shielded by my jacket. But as I turned to scrutinize the darkened street, it was empty. No trace remained of the car that had trailed me through the night. Since that fateful encounter, whenever I drive after dark, I find myself glancing more frequently at the rearview mirror. And on foggy nights, a familiar unease grips me as I half expect to glimpse those steadfast headlights in the distance, patient and vigilant. I ponder whether that car continues its silent vigil, trailing another unsuspecting traveler, or if it bides its time, waiting for the opportune moment to once again waltz through the nocturnal streets, beckoning me to join its enigmatic dance. Story 18. The rain whispered a gentle lullaby against the windows of the cozy establishment, harmonizing with the soft clinks of cups and the murmurs of the few lingering patrons. Seated at the bar, I observed the play of dim lights pirouetting on the polished surface of the dark wood. Jack, the bartender, moved with a deliberate, almost hypnotic grace as he polished glasses. An unfamiliar depth lingered in his gaze that night, a nuance I had not noticed in my routine visits. His hands, usually steady, betrayed a faint tremor as he placed my customary lavender tea before me. The delicate fragrance of lavender waltzed through the air, mingling with the rich scent of coffee and the aged wood that embraced the room. Jack stole glances towards a shadowed table in the far corner, where a solitary figure sat motionless, blending into the scenery. With measured steps, Jack approached to refill my cup. Though his voice remained composed, a subtle tension threaded beneath his words as he inquired if I desired anything more. In that moment, a disquieting detail caught my eye. A faint reddish stain marred the cuff of his otherwise pristine white shirt, a blemish barely visible in the dim ambience. Time drifted by languidly, the rain maintaining its mesmerizing cadence outside. Patrons bid their farewells, leaving behind empty seats and abandoned cups. Solemnly, the enigmatic figure in the corner lingered, a silent sentinel awaiting an unknown cue. Jack meticulously tended to the bar, a meticulousness bordering on obsession, arranging bottles and dusting already spotless surfaces. His movements betrayed a growing restlessness, while the pendulum clock's relentless ticking underscored the passage of time. Amidst this quiet choreography, a glint caught my eye under the counter A weathered notebook nestled among the bottles. As Jack tended to the final patron, I perused the yellowed pages. Neat, diminutive script filled the pages in an orderly procession of names, dates, and places. Yet it was the concluding entries that drew me in, a series of cryptic notations, numbers devoid of apparent meaning, accompanied by intricate symbols etched with precision. A faint sound of footsteps stirred my attention. The mysterious figure finally stirred from their secluded realm, making their way towards the exit. An exchanged glance with Jack crackled with unspoken tension, a fleeting yet palpable exchange. The bartender nodded imperceptibly as the stranger vanished into the rainy shroud of the night. Jack resumed his duties, but a shift had occurred in his demeanor. His usually steady hands now quivered as he stowed away the glassware, his gaze adrift in contemplation, grappling with distant recollections or fervent attempts to bury them. As I readied to depart, Jack halted me with a gentle gesture. In a hushed tone, he confided, "There are tales a bartender witnesses and hears, secrets that ought to remain veiled within these walls, yet at times the burden of these hidden truths grows too weighty to bear alone." A pregnant pause lingered before he continued, his weary countenance flickering in the lamplight's dance. The forgotten notebook loitered among the bottles, a silent sentinel of enigmatic revelations. Jack mustered a faint smile devoid of its usual warmth. "Return tomorrow," he murmured. "Perhaps a story will be shared, or perhaps not." I stepped into the night's embrace, the rain's gentle patter a soothing backdrop. Through the window's pane, I witnessed Jack resume his meticulous routine, a facade of normalcy concealing deeper mysteries. The establishment's lights dimmed as I departed, allowing shadows to veil the secrets cradled within those walls. I pondered how many untold stories lay concealed behind bar counters, how many silent sentinels akin to Jack harbored burdens too profound to unveil. Alas, the answer dissolved within the steadfast rainfall, a tranquil companion in the veil of a starless night. Story 19. The autumn breeze whispered through the trees, serenading the rustling leaves in a harmonious dance with the hushed murmurs of the passing crowd. Perched on my beloved park bench, I observed the steady stream of people meandering along the winding pathways. The air held a crispness that bore the fragrance of moist earth and dew-kissed wood. Though a book lay in my hands, my focus drifted to a subtle, almost ethereal sensation that had lingered with me for days on end. It had begun ever so subtly. One morning, amidst the rush to work, a tingling sensation grazed my neck as though unseen eyes were fixed upon me. Casting a glance over my shoulder, I found only the usual swarm of commuters hastening towards their destinations. In the days that followed, the feeling grew more pronounced, more palpable. It haunted me during midday breaks while perusing the aisles of the grocery store, and even as I sat sipping coffee at my favorite haunt. As individuals continued to pass by my perch, some solitary, others in pairs. A woman in a scarlet coat paused to check her phone. An elderly gentleman sauntered by with a polished cane in hand. I couldn't shake the notion that something was amiss. An indefinable shift in the familiar tapestry of faces. Closing my book, I rose from the bench, resolving to embark on a leisurely stroll. The sky painted itself in hues of amber as the first stars timidly winked into existence above. My footsteps echoed softly against the gravel as I traversed the main avenue. The elusive sensation lingered, a phantom presence trailing behind at a constant remove. Halting before a shop window, feigning interest in the wares on display, I scrutinized the figures that flitted past in the reflective glass. It was then that I discerned a peculiarity, a countenance within the throng that appeared a constant, spectral presence. Elusive, its form slipping between bodies with a fluid grace. Resuming my journey, I treaded with heightened vigilance. Veering down side streets, the crowd dwindled, yet the presence endured. Seated upon a bench in a tranquil square framed by age-old edifices aglow with lamplight, I felt the chill of the evening air settle around me as the first stars emerged. In a disquieting moment of clarity, I realized it wasn't a lone gaze tracking me, but many. A succession of eyes passing an unseen baton in a silent, choreographed ballet. Some faces recurred more frequently than others. A young woman donning a cobalt scarf, a bespectacled middle-aged man, a lad with a backpack slung over his shoulder. Rising languidly, I made my way homeward, the weight of those unseen gazes pressing upon my back. The streets now languished in near emptiness, yet the sensation did not wane. If anything, it burgeoned in the hush of evening. Seated by my window in the apartment, I gazed upon the street below. Figures traversed the pavement, some pausing fleetingly, others continuing their nocturnal pilgrimage. I pondered the true intent of these individuals, how many were mere travelers and how many were participants in this enigmatic spectacle, of which I unknowingly had become the focal point. Most disconcerting was their stark normalcy, blending seamlessly with the populace. As the city lights flickered to life, I contemplated the essence of this silent vigil. Who were they? What quest impelled them? Above all, why me? Queries that lingered suspended in the night air as darkness draped the city in its velvety cloak. Since that fateful realization, I've acclimated to this newfound awareness. At times, I strive to discern my observers, others I feign ignorance. Yet they persist like phantoms flitting at the periphery of my existence. In the nocturnal stillness, as I peer from my window onto the waning streets, I ponder if they too contemplate my presence, concealed within their abodes, preparing for another day of this cryptic minuet of glances and apparitions. Story 20, the hotel corridor glowed in a soft amber light filtering through glass shades tinted like honey. It was deep into the night, with only the gentle hum of air conditioning breaking the silence. Dragging my suitcase quietly over the rich burgundy carpet, I made my way towards the elevator. The weariness from a long day of meetings clung to my shoulders, a heavy cloak from hours of travel. I pressed the elevator button and waited, watching my fuzzy reflection in the mirrored doors. The digital numbers above the elevator ticked slowly, 654, casting a soft green glow that danced on the walls. The doors parted with a gentle chime, inviting me into the small space lined with mirrors and dark wood. My destination was the 7th floor, the apex of the building. I pushed the button and leaned against the back wall, allowing my eyes to shut briefly. The elevator began its ascent, a seamless, tranquil movement. The mechanism's sound was a whisper, a steady rhythm akin to a quiet breath. When I opened my eyes again, a peculiar sight greeted me in the mirror's reflection. It appeared as if my image lagged behind my movements, a mere fraction of a second delay, an illusion perhaps born from fatigue. Shaking my head to dispel the odd sensation, I refocused as the elevator came to a gentle halt and the doors slid open. Stepping into the hallway, a wave of unease washed over me. The carpet was now a deep forest green, a stark contrast to the burgundy below. The antique wall sconces exuded an Art Deco charm, a detail I had not noticed earlier. Confirming the display still showed the 7th floor, the ambience felt entirely transformed. The corridor stretched longer, narrower, as an unfamiliar scent lingered in the air, reminiscent of old tomes and ancient wood. The room numbers were peculiarly labeled, 7A, 7B, 7C, a departure from the standard numerals I knew. Turning back towards the elevator, I found the doors shut tight. Pressing the call button yielded no response. The display above remained dark, as though the elevator had vanished into thin air. The silence grew dense, nearly palpable. Treading cautiously along the hallway, I sought to reorient myself. The lights pulsed gently, a rhythmic sway akin to breathing. Each door I passed bore a striking resemblance to the last, yet each exuded a distinct aura, hinting at hidden stories within the dark wood facades. At the hallway's end, a figure sat nestled in an antique armchair. An elderly doorman, adorned in a vintage uniform, his snow-white hair immaculately coiffed, met my gaze as he peered up from his book. A warm smile played on his lips as he inquired, "Are you lost?" His voice soothingly familiar, as though we were old acquaintances. "I believe so," I confessed. "I was aiming for the 7th floor, but this place—" "Ah, this is indeed the 7th floor," he interjected with a cryptic grin. "Just not the one you sought. You see, this elevator possesses a quirk. It guides weary travelers to where they ought to be, not necessarily where they intend to go." Surveying my surroundings anew, I noted the intricate details. Sepia-toned portraits in golden frames adorning the walls, capturing smiling faces from a bygone era, and a wall clock ticking backwards, defying conventional timekeeping. "Worry not," the doorman reassured, closing his book gently. "The elevator shall return in its own time. Meanwhile, why not take a seat? Time is but a fleeting concept here." Nestling into the armchair beside him, a sense of tranquility enveloped me, dissolving the weariness that had clung so tightly. The once eerie silence now felt comforting, akin to a warm embrace. Engrossed in his reading, the doorman and I settled into a serene companionship. Shadows pirouetted on the walls, weaving hypnotic patterns that lulled my senses. Time seemed to slip away, a fluid continuum devoid of markers. The tick-tock of the reverse-moving clock wove a melodic tapestry, a soothing cadence akin to a lullaby. At length, the familiar chime of the elevator broke the enchantment. "Ah," the doorman remarked without raising his gaze, "it seems your path awaits." Rising to my feet, a peculiar sense of rejuvenation filled me. A Approaching the elevator, I turned to express gratitude, only to find the armchair vacant. The book left behind on the armrest gleamed softly in the ambient light, its well-worn leather cover whispering of untold tales. The elevator doors parted soundlessly, and as I stepped inside, the journey was swift. Stepping out, I found myself back in the familiar corridor with its burgundy carpet and contemporary sconces. Unlocking my room door, I stole a final glance at the elevator. For a fleeting moment, the digital display flickered, showcasing not a number but a symbol unknown to me, before reverting to the familiar 7. Since that curious night, every elevator ride in a hotel sparks a question in my mind. Will it ferry me to my desired destination or guide me to where I truly belong? And on nights wrapped in silence, the faint rustle of pages being turned by invisible hands echoes in a hallway existing betwixt floors, a realm of mystery and serenity. Story 21. In the hush of the night, the echo of my footsteps lingered down the ancient wooden corridor. Each step I took caused the floorboards to murmur beneath me, harmonizing with the gentle patter of rain on the window panes. A sweet aroma, reminiscent of aged wood and weathered paper, wafted through the air, enveloping me in a comforting embrace. I stood before the door at the hallway's end, the entrance to a room untouched for months. The lock gleamed faintly under the soft glow of the wall lamps, beckoning me with a subtle allure. I vividly recalled locking it last, the routine of turning the key thrice and testing the handle, a ritual of reassurance. Yet on this particular evening, a subtle shift was palpable. The space surrounding the door felt cooler, a delicate layer of dust settling on the brass handle in an intricate pattern that drew my gaze. Intrigued, I drew nearer, observing the dust forming concentric circles, as though an invisible hand had traced them. The wood exuded a faint warmth, barely perceptible under my palm, an oddity for a closed-off room devoid of heating. Placing my ear against the door, I strained to listen. Amidst the profound silence, a distant sound akin to the slow, steady breaths of a slumbering being teased my senses. Retrieving the key from my robe's pocket, its warmth against my skin felt oddly comforting. With deliberate motions, I inserted the key into the lock, aiming for silence. It glided in smoothly, yet turning it proved challenging, the lock resisting as if altered from within. My heart quickened not with fear, but a blend of curiosity and anticipation, akin to the moments before a significant revelation. Trying the key in the opposite direction, it yielded with surprising ease, emitting a delicate click. As the door swung open, a warm, fragrant breeze greeted me, redolent of freshly brewed vanilla tea. Moonlight filtered through gossamer curtains, casting a silver sheen over the room. Everything appeared as I remembered, yet subtly transformed. Books on shelves arranged in novel patterns, the velvet armchair shifted toward the window, an unfamiliar empty cup on the side table. Approaching the mahogany desk, my fingers trailed over its surface, disturbed dust hinting at vanishing words. Beside the inkwell lay a faded sheet inscribed with a sentence in a script resembling my own, though unfamiliar. Time flows differently here. Reading those words, I felt my breath synchronize with the curtain's gentle sway, devoid of any breeze. The room's silence felt animate, thrumming with inaudible whispers. Sinking into the plush armchair, I gazed at the reflected room in the window, a fleeting glimpse of a blurred figure dancing in the shadows behind me. Yet upon turning, only the moon's reflection remained. Briefly closing my eyes, I absorbed the silence, reopening them to find a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere, objects minutely displaced. The once gold cup now radiated warmth, wisps of steam curling upward. Rising from the chair, a veil of mystery draped over me as I moved towards the door, footsteps silent on the wooden floor. Pausing at the threshold, I cast a final glance backward. The room exhaled softly, akin to a slumbering entity. Closing the door gently, the click of the lock echoed like a lullaby in the hallway's silence. Since that night, a hint of vanilla tea lingers whenever I pass, accompanied by the whisper of pages turned by unseen hands. I've refrained from reopening the door, aware the room harbors secrets best left undisturbed, nestled in the tranquility of its own clandestine existence. Story 22. The November breeze gently played with the dry leaves scattered on the driveway as I gazed at the looming silhouette of the abandoned mansion set against the dreary sky. Locals dubbed it the never-inhabited house, though in reality it had a history of a long-forgotten resident, yet the identity of that resident had faded into obscurity. Approaching the weathered gate, its cold, wrought iron bars greeted my touch. A unique scent of moss and damp stone lingered in the air, adding to the mysterious allure of the place. The garden, overgrown with tangled brambles and nettles, seemed to reclaim the decaying mansion with nature's embrace, yet an air of melancholic elegance still clung to the property. As a real estate agent, I had the task of evaluating the estate, as the current owner, an elderly man residing abroad, sought to sell it. He had never stepped foot in the house, inheriting it from a distant relative and now wishing to divest himself of the burden. Walking through the wild garden, I noticed peculiar signs of recent activity amidst the weeds, faint paths hinting at a mysterious visitor. Curiosity tugged at me. Who could it be? The neighbors insisted that the property remained untouched by human presence. Pushing open the front door, it emitted a soft, eerie creak. Inside, a bluish twilight shrouded the interior, casting shadows through the closed shutters. The atmosphere was thick with dust and the faint scent of aged wood. Each step across the creaking floorboards echoed through the deserted main salon, where covered furniture loomed like specters in the dim light. Enormous veiled mirrors adorned the walls, their clouded surfaces playing tricks with the scarce light, evoking illusions of movement. Ascending the staircase, my hand trailed along the polished wooden handrail, worn smooth by generations of hands. The upper floor revealed a series of closed doors along the corridor. I pushed them open one by one, capturing the empty rooms on camera for the appraisal, save for some shrouded furniture. It was in the final room that a sense of unease crept over me. A woman's bedroom, untouched yet disturbed, hinted at recent activity. A silver brush lay on the dresser beside dark, fresh strands of hair, untouched by dust. The perfectly made bed, with a subtle indentation as if someone had sat there moments ago, sent a shiver down my spine. As I turned to leave, a flicker in the mirror caught my eye, a fleeting image of a female figure seated on the bed. Startled, I whirled around, but the room stood empty, though a lingering presence seemed to linger in the air. Descending the stairs hastily, the salon now cast in shifting shadows with the waning daylight, the mirrors appeared to watch my every move as I made my way to the door. A faint haunting melody, as if whispered by a ghost, reached my ears from upstairs, stirring a sense of nostalgia and sorrow. Leaving swiftly, I closed the heavy door behind me, the garden now cloaked in a stillness that belied the mysterious events within. Pausing at the gate, I glanced back, catching a glimpse of movement behind an upstairs window, a fleeting glow fading as quickly as it appeared. In the days that followed, I compiled my report on the property, detailing its condition, necessary renovations, and potential value. Omitting the peculiar details of the bedroom, I noted cryptically, the property possesses a unique charm that may appeal to a discerning buyer. The mansion lingered on the market, its enigmatic aura captivating passers-by like myself. Each time I paused by the rusted gate, a spectral figure seemed to glide through the upper rooms, as if waiting for a long-lost companion. Perhaps the secret of the never-inhabited house lay not in its lack of occupants, but in the eternal presence of a soul that refused to depart, forever haunting its shadowy halls. Story 23. Night embraced the house in its tranquil embrace, as whispers of the wind gently caressed the leaves of the ancient tree in the garden. Nestled in the armchair of my bedroom, I gazed at the shadows pirouetting on the walls in the flickering lamplight. It was the time when slumber typically beckoned, yet a peculiar resistance to the call of Morpheus had taken hold of me. Night after night, for weeks on end, a recurring dream had woven its intricate threads through my mind with an unsettling precision. The room's warmth and the steady cadence of the old pendulum clock coaxed me towards drowsiness. My eyes settled on the open diary atop the desk, each page meticulously chronicling the details of that enigmatic dream. My neat script adorned the pages, narrating a familiar sequence. A spiral staircase of gray stone spiraling into the depths, the distant melody of water droplets, and a grand wooden door adorned with cryptic symbols. Leafing through the entries, a previously unnoticed detail caught my eye. With each descent down the stairs in the dream, the temperature appeared to gradually plummet. I could almost feel the chill of the stone beneath my fingertips, my breath materializing in the air as wisps of vapor. Yet the dream's true allure lay in the profound sense of recognition that accompanied me on this mysterious journey, as though the staircase led to a place I intimately knew, despite its foreignness in reality. The closed door at the staircase's base remained an enigma, yet each night I inched closer to unraveling its secrets. The fluid symbols etched upon the wood seemed to dance under my gaze, their shapes shifting as if imbued with life. In the dream, my fingers traced the contours of these mystic symbols, evoking a subtle thrum through the door, as if it pulsated with breath. That particular evening, a peculiar object caught my attention in the room. Nestled next to the lamp on the nightstand, an ancient bronze key lay, a relic whose ornate design oddly echoed the symbols adorning the dream door. Picking up the key, I was struck by its weight and the icy touch it exuded. Though its origin eluded my memory, its presence felt oddly natural, as though it had always belonged in my possession. Drifting into bed, clutching the key, its tangible weight reassured me of its reality amidst the realm of dreams. As sleep wrapped its embrace around me, a premonition tingled in the air, a whisper of change. The dream unfolded familiarly, the spiral staircase, the echoing drops, the descending chill. Yet this time, as I approached the door, the key thrummed softly in my grasp, harmonizing with the carved symbols. Bringing the key to the lock hidden among the engravings, a hush fell as I turned the mechanism with a melodious click, a tune of ancient lore. The door creaked open, revealing not another chamber, but a mirror reflecting the staircase behind me. In the reflection, the steps ascended instead of descended. Awaking in my room, the soft hues of dawn filtering through the curtains, the key still nestled in my hand, now emitting a faint warmth, a semblance of life. On the open diary rested a new page, its characters akin to the door symbols, morphing and swaying like ink upon a restless sea. Since that transformative night, the dream has not revisited. The key rests on my nightstand, occasionally pulsating with a quiet hum on serene evenings. I often ponder the mysteries awaiting at the apex of the mirrored staircase, and whether one day I shall summon the courage to ascend its ethereal steps. For now, I find solace in observing the dancing symbols within the diary, narrating a tale that perhaps eludes my current comprehension, a story veiled in the shadows of the night, whispering secrets untold. Story 24. Autumn evenings in our neighborhood always carry a touch of magic. The crisp air whispers the secrets of fallen leaves, and the hushed footsteps on the damp pavement add to the mysterious allure. Lately, on my way home from work, a peculiar occurrence has captured my attention during these twilight strolls. At the intersection of Maple Street and Rose Avenue stands a streetlight unlike the others. While its companions cast a steady, golden glow, this particular light behaves in a most curious manner. As I draw near, it begins to dim gradually, almost as if it wishes to conceal something from my sight. Initially, I dismissed it as a mere malfunction, a neglected fixture in need of repair, but the pattern persisted. The light only waned in my presence, refusing to reveal its hidden truth to me. Intrigued, I decided to investigate further. One evening, I halted about 60 feet away, leaning against the weathered facade of the Art Deco building on the corner. From this vantage point, the streetlight shone brightly, casting elongated shadows and causing dewdrops to shimmer in the nearby garden. With each step toward the light, its radiance faltered. The closer I approached, the more it dimmed, almost as though it held its breath in anticipation. Standing beneath its faint glow, I noticed peculiar markings etched on the glass, barely discernible in the dwindling light. As I reached for my phone to illuminate the enigmatic symbols, a sudden breeze stirred the leaves, and a sense of movement within the streetlight's enclosure sent a shiver down my spine. In the days that followed, I made a habit of passing beneath that enigmatic streetlight, observing the same ritual unfold each time. The dimming light, the thickening silence, the sensation of being observed from above. My scrutiny revealed subtle nuances, the shifting hues, the almost imperceptible changes in color that seemed to convey a hidden message. One moonlit night, within the circle of dim light, a melodic hum resonated from within the metal pole, its vibrations palpable against my palm. It was as though the streetlight sought to communicate through its ethereal song, drawing me into its mysterious realm. Intrigued, I meticulously recorded each encounter, noting the light's behavior in correlation with lunar phases and the precise timing of its return to brightness after my passing. As time passed, I found myself entranced by the streetlight's mystique, unconsciously participating in its silent ceremony. I lingered beneath its muted glow, captivated by the faint hum that seemed to echo tales of bygone eras. The allure of this enigma gradually wove itself into the fabric of my routine, shaping my nightly journey homeward. I resisted seeking a rational explanation for the phenomenon, embracing instead the allure of the unknown. In that fleeting moment of dimness, when the world paused and shadows danced, I felt connected to a greater mystery, a puzzle unfolding in the language of light and shadow. Each evening, as I approach the waiting streetlight, I anticipate our shared moment of twilight communion, a silent understanding between myself and this spectral guardian. In the veiled dance of shadows and light, I find solace in the enigmatic embrace of the streetlight that dims at my passing. Whether a trick of electricity, an inexplicable anomaly, or something more profound, I choose to embrace the mystery that envelops me, a reminder that even in the mundane, magic thrives in the whispers of the night. Story 25, as the gentle night breeze whispered through the curtains, carrying the fragrance of night-blooming flowers, I found myself lost in contemplation in my cozy armchair. The soft glow of a flickering candle cast dancing shadows on the walls, painting a scene of tranquility in the room. Beside me on a small table rested my treasured Polaroid camera, a relic passed down from my grandmother. Though it had been some time since I last held it in my hands, an inexplicable urge stirred within me to reach for it that very evening. The familiar weight of the camera brought a sense of nostalgia as I ran my fingers over its smooth surface, tracing the contours of memories long past. Almost instinctively, my hand found its way to the shutter button, a ritual performed countless times before. Without deliberation, I directed the lens toward the shadowed corner of the room and clicked. The sudden flash pierced the darkness, followed by the mechanical whirring of the photograph slowly materializing before my eyes. As the image began to take form on the white surface, a peculiar anomaly caught my attention. Nestled in the corner I had captured, a vague figure materialized. Indistinct yet present, it hovered like a wisp of smoke, hinting at a human form. Curiosity piqued, I gazed towards the corner in the room, only to find emptiness staring back at me. Intrigued by the mysterious presence, I snapped another photo in the same direction. This time the figure appeared more defined, as if inching closer to the lens. A semblance of a face emerged, its features blurred yet tantalizingly familiar. A shiver traced down my spine, not of fear, but of a profound fascination that enveloped me. Compelled by an unseen force, I continued capturing images, each unveiling the figure in a gradual dance of revelation. With every click, the enigmatic entity drew nearer, its form growing clearer with each exposure. It was as if the photographs acted as a conduit for its manifestation, allowing it to transcend the barrier between worlds. The room fell into an eerie stillness, thick with an unseen presence that stirred the air around me. The temperature dipped imperceptibly, and the candle's flame flickered in a dance untouched by any breeze. Mesmerized, I persisted in capturing the unfolding spectacle, savoring each moment of this silent communion. In the final photograph of that enigmatic evening, the figure loomed so close that it dominated the frame. A gentle smile graced the woman's visage, her eyes seemingly peering through the glossy surface to meet mine. A sense of familiarity washed over me, evoking memories long dormant within my soul. It was only when I rose to retrieve an old photo album that I realized my hands trembled ever so slightly. Leafing through the time-worn pages, I unearthed a portrait of my grandmother in her youth, captured by the very Polaroid I held in my hands. The mirrored smile in the photograph mirrored the one captured in the final image, bridging the chasm of time and space. Arranging the photographs in chronological order on the table, a silent narrative unfurled before me, a tale of connection woven through the lens of an ancient camera. I refrained from attempting to recreate the mystical encounter, allowing the Polaroid to reclaim its place on the shelf. Even now, on hushed evenings bathed in the golden hues of twilight, I find myself drawn to those photographs. At times, the smile in the images seems to shift, as if my grandmother is imparting a message across the realms. In those fleeting moments, the boundary between memory and reality blurs, akin to the delicate surface of a freshly developed Polaroid. Story 26. The night was draped in a profound hush, broken only by a distant, ethereal melody that tiptoed through the stillness. Nestled in my cherished armchair, a woolen wrap draped over my knees, and a forgotten cup of chamomile tea resting coldly on the side table, I lifted my gaze from the book cradled in my hands. The delicate notes meandered through the air like gentle snowflakes, barely perceptible yet undeniably present. It was the tender caress of a piano, its tune elusive yet hauntingly familiar, akin to a distant memory from a dream long forgotten. Within the dimly lit confines of my home, a solitary lamp beside me cast a warm circle of light, casting dancing shadows on the walls that swayed in harmony with the mysterious melody. Rising slowly, the woolen blanket slid to the floor with a whispering murmur as I treaded softly across the wooden expanse toward the living room window. Outside, the night lay tranquil and mute, bathed in the silvery glow of the full moon that painted the garden in a serene light, the trees whispering secrets in the gentle night breeze. Not a soul stirred in the neighboring houses, all cloaked in the embrace of darkness, yet the music persisted, its origin an enigma, echoing from every corner yet nowhere at once. Traversing room after room, the melody led me on a silent dance, its elusive whispers shifting as I moved through the familiar spaces of my abode. In the kitchen, it beckoned from the living room. In the living room, it seemed to emanate from the stairs, and on the stairs, it descended from the upper floor. A hypnotic symphony of echoes guided my footsteps in a nocturnal waltz, drawing me ever closer to its elusive source. Ascending to the upper floor, I noticed the bedroom door slightly ajar, a detail contradicting my memory of leaving it wide open that very morning. Moonlight filtered through gossamer curtains, casting intricate patterns on the floor, while the melody grew clearer, more defined, as if whispering secrets just within reach. Pausing at the threshold, I beheld my old music box, a relic gifted by my grandmother, gleaming in the muted light. Neglected for years, I had deemed it broken, yet now, in the stillness of the night, its miniature ballerina pirouetted gracefully, casting a dancing shadow on the wall. The melody it spun was the very same that had lured me, now amplified, as if every corner of the house resonated with its enchanting refrain. Approaching with a measured breath, my heart in sync with the music's rhythm, I noticed an unusual warmth radiating from the music box's surface. The ballerina, once a simple porcelain figure, now bore features strikingly familiar those of my grandmother, her sweet smile etched in miniature, a mirrored image from my childhood memories. As her gaze met mine in a fleeting instant, the melody shifted, morphing into a lullaby that had cradled me in bygone days. Enveloped in a cocoon of tranquility, I stood transfixed, as the music wrapped around me like a tender embrace, evoking not fear but a profound sense of peace and yearning. The notes swirled through the room, a gentle tide that ebbed away, and as the melody faded to a whisper, the music box closed with a soft click, ushering in a new, profound silence pregnant with significance. Returning to the armchair below, I retrieved the fallen blanket, cocooning myself once more in its comforting embrace. The book lay open, its words a mere blur, for my thoughts lingered on the music box and the spectral presence of my grandmother. I pondered the untold melodies imprisoned within its silent mechanisms, awaiting their moment of liberation. Since that fateful night, on occasions when the house lies steeped in a profound calm, and the full moon casts its silvery glow upon the garden, a familiar, soothing melody wafts through the rooms. No longer do I seek its elusive source. Instead, I close my eyes and surrender to its embrace, understanding that some mysteries are meant to be felt rather than unraveled. Story 27, night had cloaked the ancient countryside abode in a serene embrace. Nestled in my cherished armchair beside the crackling fireplace, I observed the shadows waltz across the walls as the flames leisurely devoured the logs. The warmth enveloped me like a cozy quilt, while outside the autumn breeze tenderly brushed against the rustling tree leaves. Amid this perfect tranquility, a peculiar sound caught my attention, a bell-like, childlike laughter echoing from the upper floor of the house. It was a laughter as pure as silver bells. Pausing to listen, I allowed the sound to intertwine with the fireplace's crackle. There was an unmistakable joy in that laughter, almost melodic. Yet, having been the solitary inhabitant of this dwelling for over 2 decades, I had never entertained any children. Intrigue began to stir within me like a gentle stream, slowly dispelling the drowsiness that nearly overtook me. Rising from the armchair with deliberate movements, I savored the sensation of my feet meeting the plush Persian rug. The aged floorboards emitted soft creaks as I made my way toward the staircase. The flickering candlelight in the living room cast a warm and inviting glow, casting my shadow on the walls in a silent dance. Ascending the stairs, I noticed the air growing cooler with each step. It was not a harsh chill, but rather a caress on the skin, akin to the breeze near the ocean. The laughter echoed once more, this time nearer, emanating from the guest room. It was a room seldom used, adorned with antique furniture draped in white sheets gently swaying, stirred by an unseen draft. The door to the room stood slightly ajar, allowing a silvery light to filter through, distinct from any other illumination in the house. It was not moonlight, too warm for that, nor the glow of electric lamps. It was a different light, pulsating softly like a tranquil heartbeat. Pushing the door open, the ancient would hummed a familiar tune. The room unfolded before me, bathed in that ethereal luminescence. The draped furniture formed gentle, reassuring shapes resembling clouds in a clear sky. And there, perched on the windowsill, I beheld a sight that stole my breath away. Not a defined figure, but a play of light and shadow that seemed to mimic a child. The laughter resounded once more, this time distinctly emanating from that radiant presence. No fear gripped me, only a profound sense of wonder. The light child appeared to toy with the rays it emitted, crafting luminous patterns on the walls as though painting with light itself. Drawing nearer, the room's temperature fluctuated delicately between cool and warm, like waves lapping at the shore. As I approached, the figure's movements bore a familiar essence. In its fluid gestures, I recognized echoes of my own childhood play in solitude. The realization washed over me with the sweetness of a forgotten memory. That laughter, so crystalline and pure, belonged to my own childhood self. Time seemed to stretch as I beheld that surreal spectacle. The light child continued its silent play, punctuated by that melodious laughter which now reverberated like an echo from the past. I refrained from speaking or intruding, afraid to disrupt the spell of tranquility and nostalgia. Gradually, the silvery light began to wane, akin to the sun setting on a winter eve. The childlike figure grew increasingly ethereal until only a faint glow remained. The final laughter I heard was almost a whisper, a tender farewell before dissolving entirely into the darkness. I lingered in the room for what felt like an eternity, enveloped in a serene hush. The draped furniture ceased its swaying, and the air reverted to its usual temperature, yet something had shifted. The guest room, once a repository of dusty memories, now seemed to harbor a precious secret. Retreating to my armchair by the fireplace where the embers smoldered gently, I settled among the cushions. It dawned on me that I would never truly unravel the events of that night. Was it a dream, a recollection, or perchance something deeper, a message from the past manifesting through a child's laughter in the dark? Since that night, whenever I passed by the guest room, I paused to listen. On the stillest of nights, I catch a faint echo of that crystalline laughter, a soothing lullaby guiding me towards slumber. And with a smile, I opt to leave the mystery untouched, a tender secret shared between myself and the child who laughs in the shadows. Story 28. In the quiet of the night, the rain softly tapped on the roof of the ancestral home, weaving a lulling symphony that echoed through the empty rooms. Amidst the lingering scent of aged wood and memories, I delved into the final remnants of my grandmother's legacy, tucked away in weathered boxes. Each item I unearthed whispered tales of bygone eras, painting vivid recollections of yesteryears. As the golden rays of the setting sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow upon the scene, I stumbled upon a treasure concealed within the depths of a dark leather-bound photo album. The album, its cover weathered by time yet exuding a softness that only years could impart, beckoned me with a silent promise of forgotten stories. With gentle reverence, I traced the intricate patterns on the cover before placing it delicately on the antique oak table in the living room. The musty fragrance of old paper and faint whiff of mold wafted from the album's pages, each sepia-toned photograph a portal to a different epoch of family history. Weddings, birthdays, lazy summer days captured in monochrome splendor. The faces of my ancestors stared back at me, frozen in moments of joy and tranquility. A smile tugged at my lips as I recognized familiar features passed down through generations, connecting the dots of lineage through time. The rustle of pages melded harmoniously with the rhythmic pitter-patter of rain against the window panes, casting a tranquil spell upon the room. One particular photograph, taken in the sun-kissed garden of the house during a leisurely summer luncheon, drew me in. Amidst the familiar faces of kin sat a mysterious figure, a solitary enigma standing apart from the jovial group. Clad in a flowing dress that brushed the ankles, her countenance obscured by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat, she seemed to defy recognition. A pang of curiosity stirred within me, for her presence remained unspoken of in the annals of family lore. Carefully lifting the photograph from its rightful place, I scrutinized it intently, seeking answers in the captured moment. Etched in my grandmother's elegant script on the back was a solitary date, summer 1956, a solitary clue veiled in obscurity, offering no insight into the identity of the enigmatic figure. A chill breeze swept through the room, causing the curtains to dance in a spectral waltz as twilight descended, cloaking everything in a veil of uncertainty. I illuminated the room with a soft glow emanating from the antique table lamp, its warm embrace dispelling the encroaching shadows. Returning my gaze to the photograph under the amber light, a disquieting revelation unfurled before my eyes. The shadow cast by the mysterious woman defied the laws of nature, diverging from the familiar angles embraced by the family's silhouettes. A shiver ran down my spine, recalling faint whispers overheard in childhood, alluding to a nameless woman who had graced the family's threshold before vanishing without a trace. The rain outside crescendoed, a hypnotic cadence that mirrored the turmoil within my mind as the photograph seemed to pulsate with latent secrets. The figure, once a mere specter in the background, now loomed with an ethereal intensity, beckoning me to unravel the veiled truths hidden within the frame. Squinting under the lamplight, I discerned faint traces of words etched in the corner of the photograph, almost imperceptible to the naked eye. She always sees, the cryptic message whispered from the past, a haunting echo that sent a shudder through my being. Gently returning the photograph to its rightful place, I found myself ensnared in a web of intrigue, yearning to unearth the buried truths concealed within the folds of time. How many untold stories lingered within the walls of this ancient abode, waiting to be unfurled? How many enigmas lay dormant, captured in the silent embrace of faded photographs? The rain persisted in its gentle descent, a soothing lullaby that cocooned the house in a comforting embrace. Seated by the window, the album cradled in my lap, I succumbed to a reverie of contemplation. Who was she, this phantom from a forgotten era? What secrets did her veiled gaze hold, and did her spectral presence still linger within the confines of memory? With a heavy heart, I relinquished the album to the living room table, its pages open to the enigmatic photograph, a silent sentinel guarding untold mysteries. As I retired to the solace of my chambers, a fleeting glance back into the dimly lit room gave rise to a moment of profound unease. In the flickering shadows cast by the antique lamp, it seemed as though the figure in the photograph had shifted, her gaze now fixed upon me. Was it a trick of the light, a figment of an overactive imagination, or a harbinger of secrets veiled in obscurity? Perhaps some mysteries are destined to remain unsolved, trapped within the sepia-toned confines of an ancient family album, whispering their enigmatic tales to the winds of time. Story 29, the grandfather clock in my study told midnight with a deep resonance, its chimes spreading through the hushed atmosphere like gentle ripples on a tranquil pond. Nestled in my well-worn leather armchair, a weathered book resting upon my lap, I savored the soft patter of rain against the window panes. The old house murmured softly around me, its ancient wooden frame settling into the embrace of night. My gaze drifted to the hallway door, its dark silhouette illuminated by the warm glow of my reading lamp. Something felt subtly altered this night, a shift in the air that eluded precise definition. Perhaps it was the way the brass handle caught the light, or the way the wood's grain seemed to dance in an unfamiliar rhythm. Despite residing in this abode for 15 years, the The door now exuded an aura of unfamiliarity that stirred a whisper of curiosity within me. Rising from my seat, I marked my place in the book with a delicate silk ribbon. The floor beneath my slippered feet offered a cool caress as I approached the door, the temperature dropping incrementally with each step, as if a chill of winter had descended upon this singular corner of my dwelling. My fingertips brushed against the handle, its unexpected warmth a stark contrast to the cool night air enveloping me. The door swung open effortlessly, revealing the familiar hallway beyond. Everything seemed as it should be: the faded wallpaper, the worn carpet, the framed photographs adorning the walls. With a shake of my head, I dismissed my fanciful musings, attributing them to an overactive imagination fueled by too many mystery novels. That night, my dreams were filled with doors that materialized in improbable locations, doors with brass handles that radiated warmth despite their surroundings. Upon waking, I proceeded through my day in customary fashion, scarcely sparing a glance for the hallway doors I passed by. It wasn't until twilight descended, casting its shadows across the house, that I noticed a peculiar alteration. The door's hue appeared lighter, as though it had aged decades overnight. The brass handle now bore a patina previously absent. Drawing closer, I scrutinized the door with the keen eye of a photographer. The wood had indeed transformed lighter, with an unfamiliar grain pattern. The hinges, once wrought of iron black, now gleamed with a burnished copper sheen. Night after night, the door underwent subtle metamorphoses. Sometimes it aged, sometimes it renewed itself. The handle would shift position imperceptibly, or the frame would acquire or shed intricate carvings, yet the hallway beyond remained steadfast in its familiarity. I commenced a journal, meticulously chronicling each alteration with detailed descriptions and precise sketches. The door never changed under my watchful eye. Its transformations unfurled during the darkest hours of night, when the house lay cloaked in silence and my attention wandered elsewhere. One evening, I resolved to remain awake and monitor the door throughout the night. I positioned my armchair to face it directly, brewed a pot of robust tea, and settled in for my vigil. The grandfather clock marked the passage of time as I observed, my eyelids growing heavy but my resolve unyielding. At 3:17 a.m., as indicated by my watch, the lights in my study flickered momentarily. In that fleeting darkness, a subtle shift in the room's air pressure heralded a new transformation. When the light steadied, the door had changed once more. The warm oak had transmuted into a lush mahogany, delicate silver inlays, tracing mesmerizing patterns that seemed to dance at the periphery of my vision. Compelled by the allure of these new details, I extended my hand toward the handle, now crafted from crystal rather than brass. Yet a tingling sensation in the air, akin to the lingering echo of a struck bell, gave me pause. It was then I realized a peculiar absence. The door bore no keyhole. Indeed, it had never possessed one in any of its iterations. However, each morning as I traversed it, a keyhole had always been present just beneath the handle. This certainty gnawed at me like a maddening riddle, an elusive truth hovering just beyond reach. As I sit in my study each night, contemplation swirling like mist in my mind, I ponder the enigmatic door and its nightly transmutations. At times, I catch fleeting glimpses of alternate hallways through the slender gap beneath it, hallways adorned with different carpets, wallpapers, and photographs. Yet upon opening the door, it unfailingly reveals my own hallway. The notion of rearranging the photographs to test the authenticity of my reality flits through my thoughts, yet an unseen force restrains me, a whispered caution from the recesses of my psyche, warning against delving too deeply into the threshold between perception and truth. The door persists in its ceaseless evolution, each night ushering forth a new variation. I have grown accustomed to its silent metamorphoses, even finding a peculiar fondness for them. I often muse on whether it is the door itself that transforms, or if it is my perception that shifts with each viewing. Perhaps both are true, or perhaps neither. What remains certain is that when the grandfather clock tolls midnight, and the rain weaves its gentle melody against the window panes, I am filled with anticipation for the unveiling of the door's next incarnation, and the mysteries it may opt to disclose or conceal in the tranquil hours preceding dawn. Story 30, the gentle night breeze whispered through the open windows, carrying the earthy scent of a recent rain and the sweet fragrance of night-blooming flowers. Nestled in the embrace of my favorite armchair, I tuned into the symphony of the old house's breath surrounding me. The wooden beams emitted soft creaks, as if they harbored ancient tales yearning to be told. Amid the hush of the night, a peculiar sound caught my attention, a rhythmic, steady thumping echoing from the upstairs corridor. It resembled the tap of a door knocker swayed by the wind, yet there was an uncanny regularity to it, almost hypnotic in its cadence. The warm glow of the reading lamp painted playful shadows on the wallpaper, animating them into dancing silhouettes. Setting aside my book, I remained motionless, fixated on the persistent beat. Rather than grating on my senses, it carried a melodic quality, lulling me into a trance-like state. Rising languidly, my slippers sinking into the plush rug, I embarked towards the staircase. Each step on the aged wooden treads elicited a soft groan, as though the house itself responded to my inquisitiveness. The rhythmic thump persisted, unchanging in its tempo, beckoning me through the dimly illuminated corridor where moonbeams filtered through tall windows. The upper floor bore a cooler atmosphere, tinged with the subtle fragrance of aged timber and beeswax. Tracking the sound, I arrived at the door to the ancient library. Sealed shut, yet the brass knocker continued its rhythmic dance against the sturdy wood. No gust of wind stirred the air, all windows remained shut. Mesmerized, I observed the weighty knocker move of its own accord, as though an invisible force guided its patient strikes. Drawn closer by the alluring rhythm, I reached out for the cold brass handle, worn smooth by the passage of time. The door yielded to my touch, yet it felt as if an unseen presence gently restrained it from swinging open fully. The knocker persisted in its motion, indifferent to my presence, as if enacting an age-old ritual. Seating myself on the floor, leaning against the wall beside the door, I allowed the rhythmic beating to envelop me. Time seemed to blur as I lost myself in the wordless story woven by the persistent sound. My eyelids grew heavy as my mind wandered through misty recollections of ancient libraries and forgotten lore. The thumping merged seamlessly with my breath, with the pulsing of my own heart, synchronizing with the night's natural cadence. When I finally opened my eyes, the soft hues of dawn painted the hallway in a delicate glow. The knocker hung still, as silent as though it had never moved. Rising slowly, my limbs tingling from hours spent on the floor, I reached for the handle once more. This time the door swung open effortlessly. The library lay before me, untouched since the previous day, every book resting in its designated spot, the dust undisturbed in the morning light. Yet on the antique desk, bathed in the first rays of sun, rested an open book I did not recall leaving there. Its pages gleamed pristine white, as if awaiting the inscription of a tale. Since that night, the brass knocker had ceased its rhythmic dance, but on the stillest of evenings, a faint echo of that beat seems to linger in the air, as if the house sought to recall a forgotten melody. Story 31, The Rain's Secret Dance. The rain softly tapped against the windows of my aging rural home, a gentle lullaby blending with the faint whispers of the wooden floor beneath me. It was an autumn evening where reality and dreams intertwined seamlessly. Outside, the tree leaves swayed in the darkness, casting ever-shifting shadows on the hallway's cream walls through misty panes. Nestled in my beloved armchair, holding a cup of now-cool chamomile tea, I absent-mindedly watched as the floor lamp cast a golden halo on the ground. Something peculiar lingered in the air that night, a subtle yet persistent feeling that eluded my grasp. Perhaps it was the thickness of the air or the profound silence enveloping the house, almost tangible in its depth. I rose languidly, drawn by a flicker caught in my peripheral vision. The hallway leading to the bedrooms appeared elongated, stretching beyond its natural borders. Shadows loomed in the corners, dense and alive. Standing at the living room's threshold, I peered into the deepening darkness ahead. The temperature dropped gradually as I ventured forth. The floor creaked oddly beneath my steps, as if on unfamiliar ground. Family portraits on the walls seemed to regard me with altered eyes, their familiar faces slightly askew. Halting midway down the hallway, a peculiar scent wafted to my nostrils, a fragrance of ancient books and damp wood foreign to my home. I turned to the window, rain painting intricate patterns on the glass in cryptic designs, and there it was, a shadow darker than its brethren, gliding with unnatural elegance along the opposing wall. Devoid of a visible source, it possessed a solidity akin to condensed mist. Moving deliberately, almost shyly, it seemed cognizant of my presence. My breath deepened as I observed, devoid of fear but immersed in an uncanny sense of recognition, as if the shadow had always awaited my notice. The shadow paused before the guest room door, assuming a faintly human form. Taking a step closer, it seemed to react, quivering slightly. The rain's patter morphed into a constant murmur, as if striving to convey a message. Straining my ears, I discerned faint whispers in an unknown yet strangely understandable tongue. The air chilled around me, a refreshing embrace akin to silk on a balmy night. The shadow resumed its motion, gliding towards me in a slow, fluid dance. I stood transfixed as it neared, halting mere steps away. In the hush of the house, my heartbeat echoed, calm and steady. The shadow inclined slightly, a silent greeting. Acting on impulse, I raised a hand. Mirroring my gesture, the shadow seemed to extend a hand from its nebulous form. Though no physical touch transpired, a warmth lingered where our hands nearly met. With grace akin to its arrival, the shadow began to dissipate, vanishing into the air like smoke carried by an unseen breeze, leaving a trace of jasmine and profound tranquility in its wake. In that hallway, time seemed suspended as I absorbed the rain's fading melody. Returning to the living room, I found my tea still warm, as if time had paused during our encounter. Since that evening on rainy nights, I tread the hallway with heightened awareness, glimpsing that familiar form dancing just beyond reach. The mystery of the shadow remains unsolved, yet its presence instilled not fear, but a realization that some enigmas require no explanation. The hallway harbors its secret, and on quiet nights when rain taps against the windows, I anticipate a blend of curiosity and peace, a new encounter with the shadow that dances beyond reach. Story 32. In the hushed embrace of a tranquil autumn evening, a peculiar phenomenon unfolded before my eyes. Nestled in my study, engrossed in the yellowed pages of an ancient tome, my attention was drawn to the gradual dimming of the natural light seeping through the window. A curious glance upward unveiled a sight beyond belief. The sky above my dwelling was slowly cloaking itself in shades of dusk, while the world outside basked in the warm glow of the setting sun. A subtle yet unmistakable contrast painted the heavens, as if an unseen hand had cast a shadow solely over my abode. Amidst the fragrance of moist earth and fallen leaves, a gentle breeze stirred the lace curtains, their ethereal dance weaving a hypnotic melody in the room. Each passing evening unveiled the continuation of this enigmatic display. As daylight waned and the sun descended towards the horizon, that particular patch of sky above my homestead would morph into darker hues, starkly contrasting with the azure expanse surrounding it. I found myself ensnared by this nightly spectacle, perched upon the aged velvet armchair by the window. The creak of the wooden floor beneath me accompanied my vigil as I tracked the evolution of this celestial oddity. The room's atmosphere would cool, a wispy veil of condensation forming intricate patterns on the window panes, enhancing the dance of shadows within. One fateful day, amidst my contemplation of this enigma, a new revelation dawned upon me. Within the darkened firmament, pinpricks of light materialized and vanished in a mesmerizing display, akin to stars performing a clandestine ballet. Their erratic movements, devoid of pattern, held a hypnotic allure, amplified by the silent pulse of the house and the rhythmic cadence of the hallway clock. With the passage of weeks, subtle shifts in my surroundings became apparent. The antique mirrors cast softer, more embracing reflections, while shadows elongated into enigmatic shapes reminiscent of ancient symbols. The floor on the windowsill flourished under the selective gloom, as if drawing sustenance from the twilight essence. One twilight hour, as I sat ensconced in my study, a gentle caress brushed against my shoulder, a phantom touch borne on the breeze. Startled, I turned, encountering naught but empty air. The scent of aged paper and weathered timber enveloped me, time itself seeming to pause momentarily. A compulsion to document these occurrences seized me, and I diligently chronicled every nuance of the darkening phenomenon and its accompanying mysteries. Detailed entries filled the pages, capturing the subtle fluctuations of light, the dance of shadows, and the elusive vibrations that pulsed through the air. My penmanship evolved, flowing with newfound elegance and grace, guided by an unseen hand. On nights steeped in profound silence, a melody, ineffable and ancient, resonated from the darkened portion of sky. Its ethereal strains defied verbal description, yet stirred a deep chord within me. It was as though the shadows held a cosmic harmony, a lullaby meant solely for my abode. Over time, I embraced this enigma, recognizing my home as a conduit between the mundane and the mystical. As the world outside carried on its routine, I found solace in the nightly ritual of observing the darkening sky above my dwelling. Embraced by gentle shadows, I reveled in the interplay of light and darkness, embracing the coalescence of the ordinary and the extraordinary. Each twilight hour became a sanctuary of wonder, where the boundaries between reality and dream blurred in a dance of shadows and light. And so, night after night, I surrendered to the allure of the unknown, understanding that some mysteries are meant to be felt, not unraveled. Story 33, the night lay hushed, cloaked in a delicate mist that swirled like a ghostly waltz. Nestled in my cherished armchair, the rich burgundy velvet one beside the grand antique mirror, I delved into a book under the gentle glow of a vintage lamp. The pendulum clock's steady tick filled the room with a mesmerizing cadence, while the crackling warmth of the fireplace wrapped me in a cozy cocoon. Amidst this serene moment, a peculiar sensation caught my attention. At first, it was a fleeting whisper, akin to catching a glimpse of movement in the corner of your eye. Lifting my gaze from the book, I peered at my reflection in the aged mirror. The golden frame, adorned with intricate floral motifs, shimmered faintly in the flickering firelight. Yet as I studied my mirrored self, a subtle chill crept down my spine. Something felt amiss, subtly askew. Tilting my head ever so slightly, I noticed a peculiar delay in my reflection's movements, as if it strived to mimic me rather than mirror my actions naturally. I tried to dismiss it as mere fatigue or the play of flickering firelight casting deceptive shadows, but the longer I scrutinized, the more unsettling the realization grew. When I raised my right hand, The reflection hesitated briefly before mirroring the gesture. A smile tugged at my lips, and the reflection's expression followed suit with a barely perceptible lag. The fireplace's crackling now sounded ominous, as though whispering secrets in the crackling embers. The air itself thickened, imbued with a subtle tension that prompted me to breathe in a measured rhythm. A blend of candle wax and ancient musk, reminiscent of forgotten tomes and faded recollections, lingered in the room. Rising from the armchair with deliberate languor, I observed the reflection mimicking my movements with an unnatural fluidity, executing a choreography of its own design rather than mirroring my spontaneity. The mirrored eyes seemed to hold depths untold, concealing mysteries beyond my grasp. Drawing nearer to the mirror, I discerned further disquieting disparities. The reflected room bore subtle divergences from my own reality books arranged in a different order, unfamiliar objects dotting the shelves. An antique framed photograph depicting a serene seascape in my world now revealed a blurred countenance that appeared to fixate on me. The pendulum of the clock maintained its relentless swing, yet in the reflection, time trickled at a slower pace, as though the mirror realm danced to a different tempo. Shadows cast by the fireplace cavorted on the walls, crafting phantasmal silhouettes that hinted at silent watchfulness. Tentatively, I reached out to touch the cool surface of the mirror, and my reflection mirrored the gesture with an almost inviting demeanor. Our fingertips met on the icy glass, though while I felt the chill of crystal, the reflection betrayed a sensation entirely foreign. Stepping back, my mirrored self hesitated momentarily, as if deliberating whether to follow suit. When it eventually moved, its actions grew increasingly independent, as if gradually asserting its own agency. Retrieving a worn velvet cloth from a nearby drawer, I veiled the mirror in an act of finality. As the fabric cascaded over the reflective surface, a cryptic smile seemed to grace my reflection's countenance, a smirk alien to my own features. Since that fateful night, the mirror has remained concealed, shrouded in mystery. At times, during the stillest hours, faint stirrings echo from behind the velvet, as though a phantom traverses a mirrored realm akin to my own. And in the tranquil depths of nocturnal quietude, when the house slumbers in profound silence, I ponder if that reflection lingers still, existing in parallel, navigating a world of glass and silver alongside mine. The veracity of that haunting encounter eludes me, straddling the realms of reality and imagination. Each time I pass a looking glass now, a lingering doubt shadows my reflection. Is it truly me staring back, or has something learned to imitate me so faultlessly that reality blurs with illusion, leaving me to question which is the true reflection of self? Story 34, The Night of Whispering Shadows. Silence draped the narrow streets of the quaint hillside town like a plush velvet cloak. It was a serene autumn evening, where the scent of burning wood mingled with the earthy aroma of damp leaves, and a spectral fog slinked through the alleys like a silent phantom. From my lofty perch on the third floor of the apartment building, I gazed out at the neighboring houses, each window aglow with a soft amber light. It struck me as odd to see so many lights still on at this late hour, yet there was no sign of movement behind the misty panes. When the old church bell tolled 10, its chime felt hollow, as if the sound itself had been muffled by a cloak of cotton. Though I had only recently arrived in this town 3 weeks prior, never had I witnessed the streets so eerily deserted. Normally, even at this hour, a lone figure would be out walking a dog, or the chatter of young folks from the corner bar would drift through the night air as they lingered under the flickering street lamp. Seated in my favorite armchair, cradling a cup of chamomile tea, I observed that even the usual stray cat that frequented Mrs. Miller's windowsill was conspicuously absent. Wisps of steam spiraled from the cup, twirling in delicate arabesques before dissipating into the shadows of the room. I had opted to keep only a small reading lamp aglow, casting gentle shadows upon the cream-colored walls. A sudden rustling sound stirred my senses. It emanated from the hallway leading to the bedroom, a soft, rhythmic noise akin to paper being tenderly shuffled across the floor. Intrigued more than alarmed, I rose from my seat, setting the cup down on the wooden side table beside me. As I neared the hallway, I noticed a chill in the air, not the harsh bite of winter, but a coolness reminiscent of stepping into an ancient church. The floorboards murmured softly underfoot, a familiar creak that oddly comforted me. Upon reaching the threshold of the bedroom, I hesitated. The door stood slightly ajar, and from within leaked a faint bluish light unlike any other illumination in the house. Pushing the door open with a cautious creak, I found the window closed, yet the curtains swayed as if stirred by a gentle breeze. Nestled on the floor beneath the window lay a single sheet of paper. Bending to retrieve it, I saw that it was a page torn from a newspaper. The date atop the page read October 15, 1954, and the headline of the article seized my immediate attention: Enigmatic Night of Silence in Pine Grove. The article recounted a peculiar night when the townsfolk had all remained sequestered in their homes, as though adhering to an unspoken pact whose origin had faded from memory. As I perused the text, a movement beyond the window snagged my gaze. Across the street, the lights in the houses began to extinguish one by one, like candles snuffed by a passing breath. Yet within the dim interiors, I discerned motionless silhouettes that appeared to be peering out towards the street. A vibration in the pocket of my robe heralded a message from the building's WhatsApp group. Tonight, everyone remains indoors. It is imperative. Peering out the window once more, I noted that all lights had now been extinguished, save for mine. In the deepening hush, I detected the steady cadence of my own heartbeat slowing, as if harmonizing with something ancient and enigmatic. Perching on the edge of the bed, still clutching the newspaper scrap, I marveled at its extraordinary softness, as though it had been handled countless times. Beyond the window, the fog had thickened, enfolding the street lamps in a milky shroud. From my vantage point, I beheld the entire stretch of the town's main thoroughfare, utterly deserted. Recalling the article's mention of how, after that silent night, the townspeople had no recollection of the events that transpired, I rose slowly and made my way to the light switch. Before extinguishing it, I stole a final glance through the window. The mist outside had assumed sinuous, almost dance-like forms, and for an instant I fancied I glimpsed figures moving within it, like phantoms adrift in a sea of milk. As the room plunged into darkness, I reclined upon the bed, fully clothed. The silence now enveloped me entirely, punctuated solely by the measured ticking of the clock on the nightstand. Drifting towards slumber, I pondered whether come morning I would retain any memory of this peculiar night, or if, like the other denizens of the town, I would remain oblivious to the cyclical mystery that enshrouded our lives. The final echoes that resonated in my mind before succumbing to sleep were the distant tolls of midnight bells, their peals strangely muted, as if emanating from a realm where time held a different sway, and where silence reigned as the universal tongue of all beings. Story 35. The fall garden lay under a delicate shroud of mist that morning as I gathered the fallen leaves from the night before. The crisp air brushed against my skin, carrying the fragrance of moist soil and the chrysanthemums I had carefully planted not long ago. Silence enveloped the surroundings, broken only by the soft crunch of dry leaves beneath my feet and the occasional chirping of an early bird. As I worked near the weathered stone bench, a glimmer amidst the foliage caught my eye. A faint silver reflection beckoned me, akin to a dewdrop capturing a sunbeam. Kneeling down, I gingerly brushed away the damp leaves, revealing an antique necklace. The craftsmanship was exquisite, featuring an oval pendant adorned with intricate floral designs and a small azure gem at its center, radiating light in a mesmerizing manner. Taking the necklace in my hands, I felt its weightlessness and cool touch against my skin. It was unfamiliar to me, undoubtedly not belonging to anyone I knew. Having lived alone in that house for over 2 decades, I couldn't recall seeing any neighbor don such a piece of jewelry. The blue gem continued to gleam with a peculiar luminosity, almost as if it held its own inner glow. That night, after tenderly cleansing the necklace, I placed it on the nightstand by my bedside. Falling asleep, I watched as moonbeams filtered through the window, casting dancing shadows on the walls from the metallic pendant. Throughout the night, I stirred awake multiple times, sensing a distant melody, akin to a music box playing somewhere within the house. A sweet, melancholic tune, almost fleeting, dissolving when I tried to focus on it. Come morning, I noticed the necklace had shifted on the nightstand, as if someone had moved it during the night. In daylight, the blue gem appeared less radiant, yet as I held it, a gentle warmth emanated from the metal, contrasting the coldness it exuded the day prior. Curiosity piqued, I decided to delve into its origins. In the ensuing days, subtle changes unfolded within the house. Items on the kitchen table seemed rearranged each morning, as if scrutinized during the night. Family portraits in the hallway appeared slightly askew daily. The nocturnal melody persisted, growing clearer, more recognizable, yet elusive in pinpointing its origin. One evening, while engrossed in reading, the necklace resting on the nearby table, I distinctly heard light footsteps from upstairs. The delicate sound, akin to a child tiptoeing, prompted me to ascend the stairs stealthily, only to find emptiness. However, in the guest room turned storage space, I discovered an unfamiliar old wooden box, intricately embellished with matching floral motifs as the necklace. Within, on a faded velvet cushion, lay a yellowed photograph. It depicted a young woman donning an identical necklace, with a date and a faded ink inscription on the back, to remember the happy days in the garden. From that night onward, the music box melody resounded more frequently, no longer unsettling. It felt as though the house itself hummed a lullaby, a soothing melody that filled the rooms during the quietest hours of the night. Sometimes, amidst the autumn garden evenings, a vague figure seemed to flit among the trees, resembling a memory attempting to materialize. The identity of the woman in the photograph and the necklace's origin remained elusive. I embraced the enigmatic presence in my life, akin to the season's transitions and the passage of time. The necklace still rests on my nightstand, and on tranquil nights, under the full moon's glow and the whispers of the wind through the leaves, faint laughter intertwines with the music box's melody, an echo of joyous days forgotten by time.